Hello and welcome to BOOTHCAST. On BOOTHCAST, I speak to people who inspire me about sport, business, and the winning mindset. Today's guest is an Olympic champion in C1 paddling. He also has a silver medal at the Olympics. I believe he's a silver medalist at a world championship. He's a very renowned chatterjack paddler. He's won 5 times. He's won the over 50s at Carolina Cup. He's a superstar SUP coach now. He runs the paddlemonster.com website, and I believe he's still coaching canoe. So Larry Cain, thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers, man. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So how is it over there at the moment? How is it paddling through the breaking the ice? I always see your images of you paddling through the middle of winter.
It's cold. It's cold. And you know what? This winter doesn't seem to want to end. You know, we get like a warm day. Like the last couple of days have been a little warmer. And then we're going to get another deep freeze this weekend. So it seems like there's no end to it. But hey, what can you do? You know, like it's better to go out and come in with ice all over your board than to not go out at all, right? So because it's a long winter. If you don't paddle, it's a long winter. Like you'll be off the water from, you know, kind of mid-December till, unless you go somewhere warm, until, you know, March. And that's a long time, right? So it's a long time if you want to be good, because it's just, I mean, you can't afford to be off the water that long. And it's just a long time if you like to paddle, you know, like you miss what you love to do, right?
And how do you get out there in the middle of the cold? Like here, it's like, I don't know, 40 degrees Celsius or 100 plus, you know, like every day for like the last, I don't know, month almost. It's like one of our hottest summers ever. And like, we're like, it's too hot. Like once it gets over like 35, you're like, I don't even want to go outside. I want to paddle. But how do you get yourself out of bed to go or paddle like with ice around your feet and you're breaking ice? I know a lot of paddlers in Europe do it a fair bit, like got their dry suits on, their 7 mil booties, like all that type of thing. How do you get motivated to go and do that?
Well, I mean, it's just a question of what else are you going to do, right? Like going to the gym, you know, the novelty of that wears off. And, you know, if you're running outside, which I've done for years and years, it's just as cold as paddling. So you might as well, if you're going to be cold, you might as well go and do what you love to do, right? And it's really the same for, you know, cross-country skiing. Any kind of outdoor activity is you might as well be on the water. And what I always tell people, you know, people see us launching or coming in from a paddle and they're, you know, walking their dogs along the beach, and they'll say, "Oh, aren't you're crazy? Aren't you cold out there?" And I look at them and I'm like, "I'm warmer than they are," you know, because I've been working, right? And it's always summer inside your dry suit, you know. So if you're geared up right, it's okay. And like you don't even feel if you got, you know, the proper gear on, you got like wool socks inside your boots. You got and I put I don't like admitting it because it's not environmentally friendly, but I take a plastic bag and put it over my sock, and then I slide it into the boots. So even if the boots get wet, my feet stay dry. And I use those you know, those nitrile, those blue gloves that doctors wear, those examination gloves. I put them on underneath my neoprene gloves. It keeps me from, you know, if I got a cut or something on my hand, from it getting infected by the dirty neoprene. But I found that keeps your hands warmer too, because you'll sweat inside them, and then you got like this nice, you know, warm sweat, you know, on your hand. And like my neoprene gloves I'm using this winter have holes in them. They were 3 mil. Now they got holes in them, and my hands haven't been cold yet this winter. So if you're geared up right and you know, you do it right, it's not that bad. And you know, it beats sitting inshore, right? Like it's a long winter to not go paddling. What are you going to do? You know, like it's just the novelty of the gym wears off quick. And then with COVID too, you know, half the time the gym's been closed. So, you know, again, what are you going to do, right? Paddling's the best place to be in a pandemic.
I think you made a post about that. Right?
So,
I think you made a post about that recently when you're in the gym or something like that, and you were like, "Oh, I got to get paddling, or it's about time like I get back to the gym because of COVID," or something like that. Was that?
Well, yeah. So what I did notice is, like, when the pandemic hit, it was what was it, like March 2020, and so the gym's closed right away, and so I didn't go back to a gym until this past September. So I was out of the gym for like 15, 16 months, and that's a long time, obviously. And I really noticed a difference in my just the strength that I brought to the board. You know, like I was strong in my paddle, but a lot of the supporting, like my paddling muscles were strong, but a lot of supporting muscles that you don't train to the same degree when you're paddling, but are important to keep you from getting injured when you're paddling. A lot of them got weaker, and I actually, for the first time in my life, started to get some little injuries, some back problems, and like a piriformis muscle in my butt was, angry at me. And so just getting back to the gym and sort of, addressing all that foundational strength was really important. And then of course the gym closed again with the new variant. So I do what I can here, and the gym's open again, so I'll start going soon. It's just I kind of waiting for the numbers to go down a bit. I see my mom every day, and she's 91. She lives in the house I grew up in, and on her own, still drives like she's like a machine. I pray that I get her genes, but like I said, I see her every day, and so I'm not just concerned about myself and staying healthy, but I don't want to bring something to her.
Yep.
So I kind of gotta stay away from the gym until I know that it's, the numbers are way down.
Yeah.
And I still wear a mask when I go in there and train. I mean, it doesn't bother me to have a mask on when I train. It's, like, seems to me you're going to try to, protect other people or protect yourself when you're working out is the time when you probably want to do it, because you're spewing out more, more aerosols when you're working out, huffing and puffing, and anything you're taking in is getting embedded deeper in your lungs, right? So, why people, if they go to the gym, why they don't wear a mask when they're working out, I don't know. But I'm sure, like, in your part of the world, it's growing old too, right? This whole COVID thing. Like, let's just get it over with and get back to normal.
Oh, tell me about it. That's actually nice that so I live over in Western Australia in Australia, and
Yeah.
we've been kind of segregated from the rest of the country for, geez, nearly 2 years. And we've had patches where we could go to different states, but we're finally opening up on March 3 because we finally got COVID properly. Like we had like 600
Right.
cases yesterday. I'd say we'll have 1,000 or something today, but it was just such a difficult period, I think, as an athlete, because
Right.
you only get so many opportunities. Like you don't get to race forever, and you don't
Right.
get to
That's
do
right.
all these things. So it's nice to open
Yeah.
up again. But yeah, you've got to balance that with the health risks and that type of thing. But now it seems for me that this what's the variant called now? I don't know, Omicron or something like that.
Omicron. Yeah.
It's less deadly. It's less
Yeah.
I don't know, less effect on your body. You're not getting like that long COVID and that type of thing anymore.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's we're all like I don't know, 70% third vax over here in WA. So I think it's just like
Right.
we've done all we can. So it's time just
Yeah.
to open
Exactly.
up and get on with our
Exactly.
lives,
Yeah.
and obviously
Yeah.
take the precautions and try and do our best with that. But geez, we can't live like this forever, and it's
No,
time to get on with it and have a bit of fun again. So I'm looking forward to getting
I
back to
totally.
traveling and going to Carolina and going to those
Yeah.
states again.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for you guys because, it's one thing when your sport career is over, you can, I mean, you can still go paddling because you like to paddle or you'd like to be fit. But for the people that, I'm coaching, or someone like yourself, like at the highest level, your window for being at the highest level it's not, it's finite, right? Like it's only going to
Yeah,
last so long, and you don't want to lose, years of,
yeah,
like, you've had 2 seasons which haven't been normal, right? They've been really affected by this. You've still had races, but you've had more races canceled, I would imagine, than you've had races go, right?
yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to, I'm sure it's hard to have the motivation to train the way you normally would when that's a situation. And I'm sure also it's hard to be as sharp when you're not racing as frequently either, right? So even when you have races, you go to them and it's not really the same, because it's not, you can't build up that continuity of, that fine edge that you get when you're racing all the time, like
Yeah,
I've seen you have before, right? So it's yeah, we just got to get back to normal so that people can do what they do. And let's hope that the next variant that comes along is going to be weaker still, right? Maybe more contagious, but even weaker.
yeah,
And because I think that's the way things trend. I mean, I'm not a virologist, but it seems to me that if viruses want to survive,
Yeah.
and so the best way they can do that is infect lots of people, but not kill them, not make them sick. So let's hope that's the trend, and we're all vaccinated and we're all making good decisions. So let's just get on with life.
Well, that's the plan, right? I think we all just don't want people to die. We don't want loved ones to die. But if it's just making us a
Right.
little bit sick, it's not a big deal. But a lot of the stuff that you said just then resonated a lot with me because I definitely found it hard because like 2020, I just lost all motivation because 2019 had my best year ever. I was racing like 20, 25 times a year and then get to 2020 and nothing, like no
Yeah.
racing. And then
Yeah.
2021, like I had to when I went overseas, it was so difficult for me to travel. I had to get like approvals from the government. I had to send my tax returns in to prove that I make an income from sport, and like I
Oh
had
my
to,
goodness.
you had to get
Yeah.
like, and I didn't know if I was allowed to travel till I think it was like 3.5 weeks before, and then I had to
Yeah.
spend like 20 grand on flights and accommodation, and it was just like whoa, like so much
Yeah.
more. But I was just like, I have to do it. But the parts that you're saying, like it was hard to train properly, like because you just never knew if you were going or
Right.
not.
Right.
Like we're in the middle of winter here, and it's like, well, if I'm going to train like a full program, if I can't go, then what's the point?
Right.
So you're like half and half, and then you got no race practice. So
Yeah.
for like 18 months, and then you're
Yeah.
going over and trying to compete at world championships and big events, which I still managed to do okay. But geez, I felt like I was racing at 70%.
Yeah.
It just
I mean, just
wasn't there.
as the casual observer, right? I mean, I watched it and it was like, you know what it was like? It was like when back when I was a kid, and we were supposed to go to the Olympics in Moscow, and we boycotted. Australia went, but Canada, the U.S., Germany, a few other countries, we boycotted. And of course, as soon as the opening ceremonies came along, we lifted all the other boycotts that we had. We started selling Russians our grain again, and all the other stuff. But the athletes didn't go. And I came second at the Olympic trials that year, so I didn't make the team. But what they did, because they felt bad about the athletes not going, is they sent them to a bunch of different World Cup races in Europe before the Olympics. And because I had done well, I'd come second, and I was only 17. They sent me with the Olympic team. And so, I was young and I was excited, and I had every reason to train because I'd never been at the highest level before, right? I could only look ahead and think of, trying to beat the guys that were ahead of me. But for the people that were missing, had their Olympics taken away from them, it was devastating.
Mm.
And I looked at last summer, I looked at the ICF Worlds and the races leading up to it. And it was really interesting because, guys like yourself who'd been at the highest level for a few years now, and, really had lost a lot from the pandemic. I could feel for you because I knew how hard it would be for you guys to race.
Mm.
And then I see and train to, prepare to race. And then I see the young guys, because there were some young guys that did really well last year that broke through. And for them, it was like, the pandemic was no big deal. Like, if anything, it was just like, it was an opportunity to take advantage of the older guys who'd had maybe some of their motivation taken away.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it didn't affect their training to the same degree, because when everything's new to you, when you've never been there before, and you wake up every day excited like crazy to just go and train to get better, right? You don't care whether there's a race or not. You just want to train and get faster. But when you're a racer and everything is focused, experienced racer, and everything's focused on the racing and the results, and you've got, you've had goals for years for that season, and you got sponsors you gotta perform for, and you got all these different things. It's killer if everything's disrupted like that. And so, I watched kind of what happened, and I look forward to a normal racing season this year, because I think it will be more difficult for the youngsters. They'll still be good because they're good.
Mm.
But we're going to see guys like yourself, be back to the level that you were pre-pandemic, because you can get back into your rhythm and you can get back into your focus training. You got your motivation back.
Yeah.
It's easier to travel. You don't have to do, all those things that, like, I can't even imagine that, being a guy that for most of my life I was on a team, and we had a team manager who took care of all that.
Yeah.
Like, I get I get stressed making my reservation or driving down to Carolina, just because it's such a hassle to book my own flight
Yeah.
after years and years where it was like, the team looked after you. So I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been and how much better it'll be, when we put this behind us.
Yeah. Oh, it's been great actually this season, and seeing the borders open here, and like I've got like heaps of motivation to train. I'm really enjoying it again because it's sort of I knew I was missing what I really enjoyed doing. And I just
Mhm.
love to train. I love to race. Like that's just ingrained in me. I can't help it. Like
Yeah.
it's just I base my whole life around racing.
Yeah.
I like it that much. I've always never got a normal job because I've always wanted to be able to race. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do I
Yeah.
supplement that? How do I keep being able to do that? And this season, now that I can actually train for something and it like more or less will happen, or like
Right.
even if it doesn't happen, there'll be like heaps of other things happening.
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
just it is. It's such a different thing. Like I'm at such a different level now. Like
Right.
2 months away from my first race, I'm a higher level now than I was when I
Yeah.
raced Worlds last year. Like it's,
Yeah.
and I don't know how that'll equate when I go overseas and I compete. And there's obviously a few different things that we've got to deal with this season, but it's going to be exciting just to be able to back racing
Yeah.
and being able to. I think I've always said that you always, when you race, you always want to be able to finish the race knowing you couldn't have done any more. And that's something I
Exactly.
just couldn't do last season. I couldn't,
Right.
I wasn't anywhere near what I should have been. I finished the race and I was like, well, there's a good quote that I've been saying recently. It's don't be upset with the results you didn't get from the training you didn't do. And I was like, I look
Right.
back at the season last season, I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
you didn't do what you have to do to win those type of things, so don't worry about
Well,
it.
and I think too, when you go to the starting line and you're really confident in your preparation, right? That just that you know that totally changes the mindset that you race with. When
Mm,
you go to the starting line, you kind of know deep down that your preparation, wasn't as good as it should be, or as it's been in the past for whatever reason. You're a less confident racer. But when you go there and you know that you've done the work, and you know that you've you've you paid attention to all the details, and that your fitness is at a really high level, and that your technique is clicking, um, you know you got confidence.
mm,
And you might still have a little bit of difficulty because, compared to when you've been racing a ton and you're really sharp from racing, because you
mm,
haven't raced as much at that level as you have. But that'll come back really quickly. You'll be rusty for a race or two, and then maybe.
yeah,
And then, but once you get a couple of races under your belt, and let's like watch out world, because I'm sure too you're going to have that little bit of extra motivation just because you haven't been able to do it for so long. You've missed it, right? You'd be excited about doing it again. And
mm,
I do think that excitement's really important. One of the things I found is, like, when I was paddling in canoe, after I'd been doing it for a long time, it was just hard to get excited for
yeah,
some of the like, basically, like the races on the tour, the world championships or the Olympics. That's a different matter. You could get excited for them, but just when you've gone to the same place, like you go to Duisburg, Germany for the 10th year in a row to race at the World Cup, and you look around you and you see the young athletes are really excited, and you remember you used to be like that, but because you've been there 10 years in a row, it's just not as exciting anymore. It's a little bit harder to race in that situation. Um, but I think you're going to have a little shot of extra excitement this year, just because you know it's been you've been deprived of it for 2 years.
yeah. No, I'm super pumped, and even there's a sport in Australia called surf life saving, and I've just been doing heaps of that because like I can
Yeah,
race every weekend. I'm a head coach
yeah,
down here at Serrano Surf Club, so like I'm just getting all my race experience again, like even racing
yeah.
surf
That's good.
ski, and like
Yeah,
like just relearning race plans. Like I just haven't
yeah,
thought about a race plan for like 2 years, like it
yeah.
just like well, I won a ski race on the weekend. Like it was only a local one, but like it's a state
Right,
level race, and for the first time in I don't know for so long, I was like, okay, get off the line and then race smart, like get on someone's
right.
wash, like race down, work to your advantage. Like the rest of the year,
Yeah,
I was just kind of like going hard, and I wasn't getting like the results that I thought I
yeah,
deserved. And I was like,
yeah.
okay, well, how do I do this again? And you start only learn that from racing. You can't.
Right. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
say to all that people that I coach, it's always about. They're always like, oh no, I need to train, I need to train, I need to train. It's like, no, you need to race. Like, if you want to be a
Yeah,
racer, you got
yeah.
to race. Like that's the best training you
Exactly.
can possibly do.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is going to be exciting to get back out there and be competing again this year. But
yeah.
we'll see what happens. But we'll go a little bit into your background. Let's talk about you upgrimming. So you grew up in Toronto?
Just west of Toronto, like a suburb just west of Toronto, about 40K west. It's called Oakville, and right on the lake. So beautiful place to paddle. Small river that we paddle canoe on, and yeah, great place to grow up.
And so Toronto's like probably let's say mid east. Like it's not all the way across, is it? It's sort of like top
Yeah,
of
no, it's
Chicago
like
sort of area.
it's the same time zone as New York City.
Yep.
It's not as far west as Chicago. It's kind of between New York City and Chicago, little further north. So it's Eastern time zone. When you look at the map of North America, you see those 5 Great Lakes.
Yep.
And we're on Lake Ontario, which is the one that's closest to the ocean. And it's still a good distance from the ocean, obviously, but it's the last lake in the chain, and it's the smallest lake, but it's still like 300K long and 60K wide. So, on its day, it gets pretty good.
Like an ocean.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's where I grew up, and that's where I did all my paddling, and it's where I still do my paddling. So it's a nice, as places in Canada go to paddle, it's probably, it doesn't get much better because the winters, cold as they are, they're not cold enough to freeze the lake over, right? So, and then the summers are beautiful. Like, I mean, you're telling me about your summer right now. Well, that's our summer as well. For 3 months at home here in Canada, it's like that. So.
And so you got involved in paddling, I think at 11, I think I read, but or 10 maybe. Why? Like, what drew you down to the lake? Like, what drew you down to paddling? And you probably didn't start straight away. Were you doing sports when you were a little bit younger? Like, was there ice hockey or something that you were
Well, you know
doing
what?
beforehand?
So, like every Canadian kid, I played hockey. Probably started around 8 or 9 years old, and played until I was 12. And then in the summers, I grew up in a neighborhood where there's 2 boys my age on the next block, and there's 3 boys, just around my age, directly across the street. So we had like a good little gang I had a good gang to hang with, and our mothers would get together and put us all in different sports every summer. And so one summer we did soccer, and another summer we did baseball. And so anyway, this one summer when I was 11, the mothers all asked us what we wanted to do, and we'd been talking about it, and we didn't want to play baseball again, and we weren't that keen on doing soccer again. So they found the canoe club. A canoe club had just started in town, and they found the information about the canoe club. Where I live, they have like this recreation brochure where parents can look at all the different programs that are offered by the clubs and by the town, and they can choose what they want to sign their kids up in. And so we all said we wanted to do canoeing. So they sent us down to the canoe club. And when I was there, I got to see a racing canoe for the first time. And, I know you've seen them because I know you used to paddle kayak as well.
I've tried one.
And so, they don't look anything like normal canoes. And we got a chance to try them. And I was the worst guy of our group. Like honestly, it took me 6 weeks before I could stay in the boat for more than like 5 seconds. Like I just get in the water, in the water. And it was like, that's when I kind of realized that I've got a gene in me that doesn't like to be the worst at something, And so I just came home every night really determined that, I was going to be able to do it, and I was going to be better than the 5 other guys kids my age that I went down to the canoe club with. And it took me about 6 weeks to be able to, there was a motorboat gas docks about 200 meters downriver from where our canoe club dock was. And I remember it was a big deal if you could go to the gas docks and back without tipping. And then it was a big deal if you could paddle in your jeans and running shoes, because it meant that you were super confident that you weren't going to fall in, right? And it took me 6 to 8 weeks to be able to do that. And, and that's going down from 9 until noon in the morning, from 1 until 4 in the afternoon, and then going down some evenings of the week and paddling as well. So, I was a slow learner, but I do think that the fact that it took so long was good because, and I taught school for 18 years and I've coached at the canoe club forever, all levels. And I do notice that kids that have things come easily to them, when things start to get hard, a lot of the time those kids struggle. And it's the kids that had a harder time, that had to work harder to, to get to a certain level, that when they get a little older and things start to get really hard, they can cope with it. And so, I actually think the way things worked out was probably good. That it was a slow start, but I don't know that I would have been as determined if it was something that I picked up easily.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing that because I think in a way I'm pretty similar. Like, because I was always the smallest guy, like I was
Mhm.
always really quite small. Like I remember being in year 7, so I must have been 11 or 12. I was like the second shortest person in the year of like 400 people, like I was always the short guy. So I always had to work really hard to get anything. Yeah, I had like, I guess a little bit of talent and I'm sure you did as well. But because I had to feel like I always had to work harder than everybody else. And I learned over time that if I could outwork people and if I
Right,
could outwork them, I could beat them. And
right,
I think the same thing, I've seen a lot of athletes over time in multitude of different sports who definitely have more talent, like they're way more
right.
talent than, but they don't have the mindset. So how much do you think the mindset for any athlete, like whether they're young or like competing at the elite level or a masters athlete, how important do you think that mindset is compared to the physical abilities?
Oh, I think it's huge. I mean, like you, I've seen lots of athletes who have all the talent in the world, but they, I mean, I won't say it's squandered, but it's never the potential of that ability is never realized
Yeah.
because they either don't have the discipline or the mindset, the work ethic, um, or they don't seem capable of um, of of having attention to detail that's required. Like there's a lot you have to do to be good, and it's not just a matter of working harder. You have to work smarter. You have to, you really have to have if you really want to be the best, you have to have a really thorough, like leave no stones unturned approach to what you're doing, right? There's all the, like you can find, 5 little things that you can do, and each one on their own don't seem like they're going to make much difference. But if you do all 5 of them, suddenly it becomes a big thing in helping you progress, ahead of your peers. And so I do think that um, mindset makes a big difference. And then I also think some people have an aptitude for performance, like for racing, and other people, even though they work really hard, unfortunately, too, some of them don't seem to have that ability to, you know, to focus when it matters, or to minimize distractions, or not have their confidence rattled when things don't go right. Because invariably, if you're racing, right, there's always a moment where things don't go right,
Yeah.
and but you gotta be calm, and you know, um, not everyone has the resilience to overcome things like a little bit of adversity like that. So I would agree with you. It's mindset's huge, and a lot of it I think is innate, but I also think a lot of it can be learned. Um, uh, you have to be willing to explore your own weaknesses and find out areas where you're not strong, maybe mentally, and work at improving them. And that's why they have sports psychologists working with top level athletes and professional athletes.
And what do you think like determines that? Do you think it's mainly just the athlete's mindset? Is it their upbringing? Is it how they're trying to balance things throughout their lives, whether that's like work or that's school, or how do people find that? Like you obviously know how to do it and there's
Yeah.
other athletes who can as well, but what is that level where it gets to where you go, okay, I'm going to keep grinding at this. I'm going to work at my weaknesses. I'm going to
Yeah.
keep pushing forward. Like what is, do you think there's a tipping point or it's just,
I, I,
you'll
I
just
mean, I
figure it
don't
out?
know. I mean, who really does know? Like if somebody knew, right, they would be like a guru, right? They would be able to get, just imagine if somebody knew what
Yeah.
it what it was. I mean, everyone in the world would be coming to them wanting to know what the secret was, and so that they could be better. I think a lot of it is innate, you know, like it's like, or innate, or as a result of your upbringing, you know, what happened in your early childhood, who knows, like, because I do think part of it is a personality. Like you had the personality to, you know, like there's lots of short kids in school who don't have the fighting spirit to, like, you know, to work harder and to want to be better. They just, you know, I've seen them. They just, you know, they're content with staying in the back for much of their life, right? And so there's the part of it, I think, is, you know, what happened when you're young and kind of what your genetic makeup is. But I also think that it really helps if when you're getting involved in whatever it is that you're getting into, that it's something that you really care about, that it captures your imagination, and it's something that, you know, really grabs you and allows you to just like immerse yourself into trying to be better at it. And I think when you find something like that and it becomes a passion, like a real passion for you, then I think it's a lot easier. I think a lot of that stuff comes out naturally, and the stuff that you don't know, if you really want to be good at something, you know, you recognize that you need to learn it, and you learn it. And you know, I'll tell you, like, you know, Adam Van Koeverden, right? Because you used to, you would have trained with him when he came to Australia, right?
Yeah, trained in the summers and that. Yeah, it's good.
Right. So, you know, for those people that don't know, he's a Olympic champion kayaker from Canada, and he paddled at the same club as me. And when he came down to the club for the first time, he was 11 years old, and he was this kind of weirdo looking kid with long hair and a ponytail, and just a little bit different. And you know, he'll tell you he was never really good at anything, and but he got in a kayak and he liked it, and it was different. And it was like he found a place that kind of he liked, and something that he liked to do, and that he was somewhat decent at. And it just captured his imagination, and he was around people who had been to the Olympics and could show him, you know, what's possible in that sport. And I also think, you know, being somebody who was probably, you know, he said he wasn't that good at a lot of things when he was a kid. Probably he didn't like seeing people be better than him, but he just didn't know what his thing was, you know?
Yep.
And then when he found his thing and he had a chance to be good at something, he just, you know, like he just pursued it. And I don't know anyone was as hard-headed a racer and trainer as him. And you know, and obviously it got him, you know, he became an Olympic champion. He won 4 Olympic medals over 4 Olympics. So, you know, but who would have known? Like, if he didn't go down to the canoe club, you know, I don't know, what would he have done? He doesn't know what he would have done, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you know, it's just some of it is just right place, right time, what activity, you know, that kind of, and people around you to motivate you and inspire you. It's I don't think there's any, you know, formula. I do think that a lot of it is just kind of like, you know, in a way, kind of dumb luck that puts you in the right place at the right time. And then you can use your talents and your you know, your mind, your brain, your passion, your heart, you know, and but I do think probably there's people who miss their opportunity, you know, to do great things because they didn't, you know, go with their friend to try an activity, or you know, or didn't go to you know, a lecture in a particular course at college, or what, you know what I mean? Like they just, Absolutely. They don't know what they're missing. So it's weird how things work out.
It's funny you mentioned Adam, because he was actually the first video of kayaking that I ever watched. Like someone mentioned to me, they're like, go watch Adam Van Koeverden's technique video on YouTube. And I think it might have been him in the Olympic final or something like that.
Right.
It's him like slowing down. Obviously a lot of people focus on his technique, and it was kind of cool to it to come full circle, because at the time I was training with a little bit Kenny Wallace and Ernst Gustafsson and Adam. They all used to train together and travel together. And eventually I got to travel with him because he was like kind of my idol when I first started paddling
Right.
because he was the guy I watched on YouTube. So yeah, it's amazing how it comes full circle. But the other thing you mentioned, chasing your opportunities, I think is really key for everyone coming through in sport or in business or in life
Mhm.
in general.
Right.
Like how, like I kind of became over time a guy who just said yes to everything. I just like, yep, I'll
Mhm.
do it, I'll try it, I'll give it a go. And I've seen a lot of people who we say, well, you probably mentioned that squander those opportunities in a way
Right.
or have a lot of talent but don't try hard enough. I found that the opportunities that I took gave me different opportunities down the track, and then they kept leading into other ones, and they kept opening more and more
Right.
doors. Like, is that? Do you think that's a mindset thing? Do you think some people are more susceptible to saying no, and some people are more susceptible to saying yes, or is it just something that you can learn, like you just spoke about?
I do think that like if I just think of people that I encounter in my day-to-day life now, or kids that I think of kids that I taught at school. Like in a classroom at school, if you got 25 kids, some of them are extroverts and they'll do anything, and other ones are really reluctant to try things, whether it's for whatever reason, fear of failure, lack of confidence. You know, they don't want to look bad. Who knows? But there are always people that just defer or decline a chance to try something, and there are other people that like they do literally anything. Right? They'll try anything, and I'm
Yeah,
actually somewhere in the middle because I I'm lucky that I found something at an early age that was my thing. And once I got fully immersed into that, I actually had, turned down a lot of opportunities to to try other things because it was everything became an opportunity cost. If I go and try, if I go on a ski trip, well, what is that? What's the impact of that on my training?
yeah,
And so I became I really narrowed my focus. But I do know people that are willing to try anything, and um, you know I think that really helps you find what it increases the chances that you're going to find what you love to do, right? I do think that once you find what you love and what you want to be good at, now's the time to sort of start to narrow your focus a bit, because you can always be, what is that expression, you can be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And so at some point you've got to realize that you have one main thing that you do, and then yeah, you still when time permits, you'll still do a bunch of other things. But you can't spread your focus too far, because if you want to be really good at something, it takes a pretty sharp focus.
yeah. And there is that sort of, as you mentioned, that cost benefit analysis, really, where you're sort of looking at, okay, these are the opportunities that are presented. And an interesting story for me was actually I was doing kayaking in 2014. I made the junior team, the senior team, and I was like going okay at it. But I came back from that trip, and basically the head coach just basically said, you're not in our Olympic plans. We're not sort of
Right.
interested in you. And I just signed a SUP contract, and I was like, but and I
Right.
was doing, and I was like, I was willing to give up everything, and I was basically just told, you're not in our plans. And it was the same around a similar time that Anders left, and I was just like,
Right.
well, I'm gonna go down this stand-up path because I can see these opportunities and I can
Right.
see that I'll be good at it. So it's really difficult, I think, to make those decisions, but
Right.
I've always gone on that gut instinct of like, okay, well, that's an opportunity cost, but that I think those opportunities are better because
Right.
the opportunities like a travel, like independence,
Right.
like making a bit of money, because like really kayaking, there's no money
Yeah.
in it, like
Right.
especially here in Australia anyway. And there was those opportunities that presented themselves, and that was great for me. But I do see guys who did stick to the course and end up having a lot of success. And you've got to have that goal set and I guess results driven mindset, especially in that Olympic type sport with those 4 year cycles. And there's only really one event every 4 years that you really want to win at, or
Yeah.
you really want to do well at.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing that we can go down. But um, the thing I want to spoke about before that is canoeing versus kayak. Why canoe, not kayak?
Well, that's what I tried first, and that's what I couldn't do. And kayak I could do. And
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna I'm not going to get into the which is easier and which is harder discussion. When I was a canoe paddler, we used to always have that with the kayak guys in the team. And then when I was a coach on the team, I used to have to listen to the athletes arguing about it. But I do think that, kayak in the sense that you're sitting, your center of gravity is lower, you've got a paddle on a blade on both sides, so you can brace on both sides. It makes it a little easier to just stay in the boat initially, right? And I think too, when I was a kid, they had these learning kayaks that were quite stable, but they didn't have the equivalent in a C1. And so the kayak was actually I could jump in a kayak and paddle around, and it was fun, but it wasn't that same challenge. And then I think the other thing that really captured my imagination about canoe is that around that time, there was a guy in the next club over, who my coach at that time had started paddling. He was his first coach, and this guy was 5th in the world and training for the Olympics, which were in Montreal in 1976. And in 76, this guy, John Wood, he actually won a silver medal. And I watched that race on television with my parents. And I watched that race. He crossed the finish line. He won a silver medal. And I turned to them and I said, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I used to, thereafter, I used to go, I would write on papers that I handed in school tests and things like that. I would write Larry Cain, future world Olympic champion, and I handed in. I would write that on my textbooks and stuff. It just became everything, that goal. And so between having a role model, somebody who again, to inspire you and, to show you what's possible. And he was great to me too, by the way. He a year later, he came to our club and trained out of our club, and was always there to, to ask questions of and to offer encouragement. And so to have that kind of support and that kind of, trailblazer to follow. And then, the shaky start and the determination that I needed to sort of overcome that I think those two things really work together to kind of make me want to be a good racer in C1. And I used to think about it round the clock. I'd wake up in the morning and it's the first thing I'd think about, and it would be the last thing that I'd be thinking about as I fell asleep at night. So I do think that helped me get good, to a decent level faster than my peers, because most kids who are 14, 15, 16 are thinking about, a whole host of things, not just their sport. Yeah. And I always, you've heard me mention already a couple of times, attention to detail. I really do think that's important. And I think that when young athletes have the maturity to have that attention to detail, it really helps them get good quickly. Yeah. Because you don't become the best at something unless you do take care of all those details. And I just naturally at an early age, just, because I wanted it so badly, I pay attention to those details, and I got good really quickly, and it made a big difference.
Yeah. So the first point is, you like C1 because C1 was harder than kayak. That was the sort of the general gist I got. Yeah. And then going forward from there, you see John would obviously take that silver medal, and that sort of really sort of drove you down that path. But the key thing that I think was interesting with what you said there was that you were writing down your name and saying future Olympic champion, future world champion. You were kind of manifesting this long-term goal that you had. What were the short-term goals in the lead up to obviously the Olympic gold medal? in '84 in LA. And then what were you doing to try and achieve that? Except like because you're manifesting what you were doing, you were constantly
Yeah.
thinking about it.
So I mean, when you're 14 and you realize that the Olympics is a possibility, and that there's you can win medals at the Olympics, and that your sport is an Olympic sport, and hey, maybe that's a possibility. You're still so far from being there that there's lots of goals that you need to set, that you have right in front of you that are more relevant than that one that's a dream, right? And I had a list of guys that were faster than me, guys my own age, guys who were the next age group up, guys who were the next age group up from that, and the top seniors, the top like national team athletes in Canada. I just had a list, and it was just like, I got to check them all off. I got to pass these guys.
Yeah.
And so that was really the goal. It was just like move up the ladder. And I used to do things like I used to at my parents' house there was a full-length mirror, and I used to get we didn't have videos and YouTubes and things like that then. We just had, if you're lucky, you could find pictures in magazines or newspapers of the top guys, right? Like during the Olympics, I cut out a lot of magazines and newspaper pictures, and I'd array them on the ground around me. I'd get like all the catch, the front of the stroke pictures over here, the pulling phase over here, the exit over here, and I'd sit in front of the full-length mirror with a broom that was about the same length as my paddle, and the straw bristles on the end of the broom, they would flex a little bit when I leaned on it, kind of like putting a paddle in the water. And I get in the high kneel position, and I look at the photos, and I'd see the position that the paddler was in, and I put myself in the same position. And I just did like crazy stuff like that no one ever told me to do it. I just did it because I was obsessed by, like moving up the list. But it turns out that a lot of these little things I did made a huge difference, like in terms of teaching me how to paddle better, or, and the training too. Like I used to, like the coaches were always like, slow down, like you don't have to start doing weights yet, and I'd be sneaking into the weight room, when I was a grade 9 at high school, and, seeing how much I could bench press or whatever, and, or doing how many chin-ups could I do. And because I just knew that, like the guys I wanted to beat were strong. Right.
Yeah.
And and I ran too. Like I ran a lot. I would ride my bike everywhere. Oh, can I give you a drive somewhere? No, I'll ride my bike.
Yeah.
Because that's work. That's aerobic work. And so, I mean, all of that added together to really, it made me feel good because I knew I was doing something towards getting me to my goal.
Yeah.
And I knew I was probably doing more than the people that I wanted to catch, at least the ones close to me, maybe not the national team guys, but and then there was just, when you raced, it was just, whenever I raced, I was really like focused. I found I had the ability to really concentrate and really, minimize distractions and just focus down my lane. And so by the time I was 16, I was the top junior in the country, and I got to race at the Junior Worlds, which was great. So I got some international experience. And then when I was 17, that was the year of the Olympic boycott in 1980. And I actually got to go to Europe and race all the senior guys, like all the guys who would end up racing in Moscow. And at this big World Cup in Duisburg, Germany, I came 5th in the 1,000-meter C1 final, which was, ridiculous. And so that's kind of when I knew that everything that I was writing down on my test papers and when I was handing them in at school, that was actually possible. Like it was within sight. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a possibility, right? There's still a lot of work to go, obviously, but I suddenly had worked myself up to the point where I belonged at that level. And I think once you belong at that level, then, you know, anything's possible, right? So, like you, I'm going to say that you came, that first Carolina Cup you did, I think you came 5th. And
8th.
8th. Okay. You're in the
Yeah.
top 8. I remember, because the reason I remember is I didn't know your name from anybody, but Adam saw the results and he was like, hey, look, Michael Booth came to top 8 at Carolina Cup. He was all impressed. I know that guy. And then the next year you won, did you not?
No, next year I got 18th, I think it was.
Oh, 18th.
And that was the real
the
wake up
year you
call.
won.
And the next
Okay.
two I won.
Next year you
So I was
won.
really frustrated after that one. And I remember coming back from that 18th. I didn't really probably have the proper preparation. And I came back and did like 6 weeks of like crazy hard training before I went to Europe. And I went to Europe and like we were winning an event in St. Maxime in France. It was like a big like wake up call. I was like, you have to do the work. If you want to win, you have to do it. Because there's a good quote at the moment. As I found it was the name of the game is to have fun, and the best way to have fun is to win. I was like, yeah, that's just me. To tell you, I hate losing. Something that resonated a little bit with you. Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I'm just going to say, but you know, right? Like once you belong, once you're in that group, then you know that, you know, like on your day you can do it. And then what you try to do is you try to prepare so that most of the days are going to be your day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's, but just getting to that level where you're in that group is, you know, then you're kind of like, okay, I can actually do this. And you get a real sense of belief from that. And then that last bit of training, which is the hard part, really, getting from being just in the group to being at the top of the group, you can, you know, it gives you that just that extra focus and extra belief and I guess extra encouragement to go and do that extra work, right?
Well, there's a lot of work between like being in the top 10 in the elite men, and then being in the top 6, and then being in the top 3, and then actually being able to win. Like when you look at results from any sport, there's about a handful of guys who can actually win. There's a couple of guys who can get in the top 3, a couple of guys have a great race and get top 6. But guys who win, there's very rarely someone who comes from 10th and wins.
No, and no, it doesn't. And it's step by step, but when you get to that top, you know, like when I got good enough to know that I could be in a final with the top guys in the world at 17, and the final is the top 9 boats. You know, I was like, okay, I just came middle of the final and you know, against these guys, like I belong. And so I'm still, you know, a good distance from winning or even from being on the podium, but like I belong, like it's within reach. And then you go home and you do the work that gets you to the next level, right?
Yep.
And the next level, and it's really the only level, the highest level that I got to, which is I got to that level where you could be top 3, top 4, like pretty consistently.
Yep.
But you could never be like, I was never the guy that was going to win 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, you know, like I was the guy that was, you know, like I could be top 3, top 4 and and on my day win. But you know, like you said, to go that extra level where you're the guy that almost always wins, like that's an entirely different, like, you know, that's just, you're in the really refined, you know, you're in the stratosphere there. Like that's just the highest level. And you know, and a lot of things go into that. It's not just the physical, it's the, you know, it's the mental, it's the, like I even say it's like the, you know, kind of like, you know, the spiritual too. Like you got to be a real kind of at peace with what you do, and you can't be afraid of losing. So you got to be at peace with if you don't win, because if you're not at peace with not winning, then you're gonna at some point in the course you're gonna tighten up, and you know that not winning can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you got to be willing to lose.
Yep.
But at peace with whatever the results are. But you know, you just are able to more often than not put it together. that wasn't, that wasn't quite me. I got awfully close to that, but I was the guy that on his day could do it.
Yeah.
But put it this way, like there's a couple of guys that I raced against who I beat them a lot in World Cup races early in the year, but like there's one guy, he raced for the Soviet Union and then later on Latvia, and he was a gold medalist in Seoul in 1988. When I came second in '89, he was first. I beat him, a lot in my career, but never when it mattered, because he just had, and I take my hat off to him and guys like him who can always seem to just find that extra gear when it, at the precise moment when it matters most.
It is quite interesting because I think it comes a little bit down to training as well. And I was always like my I guess maturity as an athlete now is nothing like when I was 20 or 18 or something like that. I was a basket case at that point.
Yeah.
But what used to frustrate me when I was younger was the last effort winners. And I actually found that a lot of those last effort winners were the guys who actually won races. Or they'd be guys who could turn it on when they had to. And I gradually learnt over time, I was like, I have to be one of those guys. I have to have another gear because I just kill myself in training. I just love training. I just flog myself if it was supposed to be level 3 or level 4 or whatever it was going to be. Like I would do that to a T. But then like come the last effort and these guys would just like turn it on. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, maybe I come down a little bit, but then I have that little extra towards the end. And that was something that I learned over time, that maybe that is really important because you have to be able to dig. You have to have that racing spirit, that racing gear that I probably didn't have when I was younger.
And that's what you had when you won your first Carolina Cup, right? Because that was the year that you had the sprint to the beach with Travis.
Yeah.
And I just remember that somebody had drone footage of that.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was sick. Like just how you just kept taking the rate higher and higher and higher in the surf, to get like it was incredible. But that was a last minute, like a last, what'd you call it? Like a last effort victory. Like it was really, it was awesome. Yeah. And that's just like, when you see that's just a really special ability. And I lost races to guys like that in canoeing, where I'd have it for 980 meters and but at 1,000 meters I'd lost by a little bit, right? So it's a unique ability, and not everyone has that.
It is. It's just, and I like how you sort of put it as like a spiritual thing as well, because you just have to find something else inside yourself to go to another level. Like I remember, for example, that Carolina Cup. There's just so much like writing about me, like not being able to downwind and not being able to do this and that and the other. And I was like, I just don't understand. So I love that stuff. Like I'm a bit of a crazy guy. If someone writes me off or says something bad about me, I just just grab it and throw it on the fire. I'm like, that's what's going to get me out of bed. Like I'm a bit of a weirdo like that. So I love when I hear negative comments, because I get another opportunity to prove myself. And because I've done it so many times in different sports, it was like, okay, well, now's the time. Like we're coming into the final leg. This is a downwind. I'm on a flat water board. I'm going against Tituan, and I'm going against Connor, and I'm going against Travis, and I'm going against the best of the best. I was like, this is your moment. Like this is when you shut everybody up. And so I was like, and I got it done. So that was a really cool achievement. That was my first win, I think, as well. So, and that was always the race that you wanted to win as a distance SUP paddler. Like it was like you had the Danny Ching's one, had won it. You had the Tituan Puyo. You had the Danny Ching, the Travis Grant. Sorry, I mentioned him again, but it was just the guys who were the best. Like that was like kind of like the World Championships really before we had that.
It was huge, and it's a tough race too, right? Because it's a bit of everything. Like if you can't be, it's not like, oh, you're just well, I was just a flat water race, you're a flat water paddler, or you got to be able to surf, you got to be able to downwind, you got to be able to grind it out in the flats, you got to be able to do a bunch of things that. And if you look at, there's a lot of good paddlers who haven't won that race, And, you know, whether it's, you know, just like the race defeats them, like it's a tough race. It's, yeah. So that was, you know, like, I mean, the cool thing, I think, when you get, what I realized, I didn't realize it in like my first Olympics, but when I started to get a little older and was still competing at that level, I really realized that um, it's not just, you know, my event, it's the other events, and it's not just my sport, but it's other sports, you know, which is why I like watching the Olympics so much when they're on, is because, and why I like talking to athletes from totally different sports, is the details of the experience are different, obviously, because the sports are different, but the experience, you know, and the idea of racing is really the same. And you know, so talking to you about like the Carolina race, like I can remember watching that, the first race you won, the first Carolina race you won, and uh, you know, watching it after, I should say, because I was in it well behind you guys, but just being really excited about what I just seen, like the level that you guys had in that race to the beach.
Mm.
And that's the same as, you know, watching, we just had the Winter Olympics, watching some of the, you know, the speed skating or the cross country skiing or whatever. It's just, and then when you talk to athletes, like I'm talking to you now about your race experience, I, you know, talk to athletes when I was at the Olympics in other sports about their experience, and you realize that you know, the event might be different, but the experience is the same. I really get off on you know, sharing these stories and hearing what other people have to say, because, you know, you realize how similar the experience is, and somebody can be in a totally different sport, but what they say really can resonate with with you and what you've done or what you have to do in
Yeah.
your sport. And there can be a lot of learning from athletes and other events.
And that's what's so cool about sport. And I don't necessarily watch a lot of sports religiously, but I love watching, like, I like watching the Super Bowl. I like watching the NRL grand final, the AFL
Right.
grand final,
Yeah.
like any of those key pivotal moments in sport, because that's
Mhm.
when the best of the best have to stand up and get the job
Yeah.
done. Because
Yeah.
you can get the job done in training for 20 years, but if you can't get it done on the day when it counts,
Exactly.
then
Exactly.
what's the point? So I just love those moments. I love seeing people stand up and own the moment. I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really key in sport. You have people like who get overawed by the moment or can't handle the pressure or all that type of thing. But there's some guys and it just clicks and they're just like, it's my moment to own. I'm going to get this job done.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
I guess, what you did in. Let's talk about a little bit about LA when you won the gold. Going into that race, like, were you the favorite? Did you know you could win? Like, was there any point before that race where you were like, yep, I'm going to win. It's my race to win. Or was it something that it happened and
No, I
you got it
mean,
done?
by that point, I've been like in '82 at the Worlds, I was fourth in both the. I guess in 1981, I was fifth in the World Championships in the 500c1. The next year, I was fourth in both the 500,000. The year after that, I was actually seventh, but I was in lane one, both races, 500,000 on a day when the
Gosh,
a brutally strong headwind off the lane 9 side. So,
yeah.
you know, I really didn't have a chance. In '84, I did really well in the European races. So I knew I had a chance to win. But I also knew that like I had a chance to not win. Like you know, like it was going to be one of those things where I just had to go and take it. And you know, what's satisfying about that day, still to this day, is that I had the best race that I'd ever had in my life. And you know, really, before that, and probably after that as well, at the precise moment in time that I needed to have it.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was just everything was like the level of focus was perfect. Um, the conditions were ideal, and I just felt like I was in total control, total command of what I was doing, and I really didn't you know, I remember I didn't really look around ever in the race, but I could tell that I was ahead because suddenly things got really quiet. You know, when you're racing in a sprint canoe or kayak race, you know, the guys on either side of you are, you know, they're what, 9 meters away from you. So you can hear them when they're breathing. And in canoe, you know, we not so much anymore now that the boats are narrower, but back in the day when the boats were a little wider, you'd be steering off the side of the boat a bit. So you'd
Yeah.
hear like a clunk as guys were finishing their stroke. And all of a sudden, you know, the race went from being, you know, all of that kind of ambient noise off the start to all of a sudden it just was so quiet. And all I could hear is like the sound of my paddle going in and gathering water and the wave off the nose of the board.
Yeah.
And that's all I could hear, all I could hear. And I just had this sensation that like I'm paddling away from everybody. And but the best thing was that I had that sensation, but I didn't let that overcome my focus of focusing on the paddle and, you know, gathering the water and the pull and the nose of my board. Or my boat. I just kept everything. I was able to keep my focus, even though I was aware that things got quiet. And what that might imply, I didn't let my focus waver. And because you know, at times in my career, I had races where I did let my focus waver, and you know, that's the worst thing you can do, right? When you go from focusing on process to focusing on the outcome, like, yeah, I'm going to win this. Invariably, you don't win, right? Like some disaster will befall you. You'll tighten up.
Yeah.
Other guys are making their push, and the more they push, once you lose your focus, the tighter you get, you know?
Yeah.
And, but anytime I raced really well, it was just blinders, you know, and focusing only on, you know, my breathing, you know, the feel of the water in my hand, the blade going in, the feel of the boat underneath me, the sound of the boat. I mean, you know what it's like when you paddle on those perfectly flat days and the sound the board makes when it's, you know, up on top of the water, and you know, it's a good sound, right? And the boat's the same way. And yeah, it was just, I really did rise to the occasion. And like I said, I knew I had a chance, but I had an equal, like, so did, you know, virtually every other guy in the race. And it was, it had, like, if I was gonna, it was gonna be me, I had to actually be emphatic in making it my day, you know, and I had to, and so, you know, I took it to that extra level, I guess. And it was tremendous. It was, but it's hard to do. Like, it was, honestly, like, I had other races in my career where I did it, but I had, and I had other races in my career where I did it, and it didn't yield me the same result because somebody did it, you know, better than I did.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's just really special when you do it all right, and it's good enough to be better than everybody else, right? And I always felt good about the races where I did everything right and I did everything as best I could. And it wasn't enough because somebody was better. I still felt, you know, how do you feel bad about that race if you did everything you could do?
Yeah.
But that race was one in particular where it was just, it was, you know, it was more than good enough. So, yeah, it was great.
All those years of preparation, all those years of manifesting, all those years of dealing with pressure, everything just sort of came together. And I think that's something that's so, I guess you could say, magical in sport when that stuff does happen, because as you said, it doesn't happen like that often. Like, you can get wins and stuff, but then you have that moment where it's just all working to exactly how you want it to, and you're clearing away from the field, and you know you are, but then you're like almost more relaxed and you're enjoying the moment and you're getting it done. You're not tensing up. You're not letting the moment like overhaul you.
Everything's just flowing, you know, like it's just,
You
It's
feel like you
just,
could go all day. Like you just,
yeah.
yeah,
And it was even like, you hear about players in team sports, like, basketball or hockey or, sports like that, where they have the ability to slow the game down.
yep,
So, you or I might be in the game and things are happening, like a million miles an hour around us. But for them, it's like the game's in slow motion,
yep,
because it's just they're at that level. They were just able to, they're so relaxed. Their mental clarity is at such a high level. And I felt like that in that race. Like it felt like, once everything got quiet, it just felt like it felt like it was in slow motion. It was just felt like it felt surreal. And that's how like perfect it was.
yep,
And it didn't, whereas other times, you race and when you're not as well prepared, and you fall a little behind, and you don't maintain that composure. You get a little, frantic, and things feel like they're sped up, and you don't have enough time to do what I've had bad races in my career where the time was faster than I did in LA, but the time was slower than I did in LA, but the race felt much faster. Like
mm,
felt like it was over much more quickly,
yep,
because I was never in control
yep.
of, either myself or the race to the degree that I was in LA.
What's interesting in those moments, and a moment that comes to mind for me was like ICF Worlds when I won that in China,
Hmm.
and coming to the finish line, and like I was like flowing, like kind of what you're talking about, like I'm getting control. I know exactly what I'm doing. I just got to keep doing it. Like I've done it in training a million times. Love that saying where you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your highest level of preparation. And
Right.
I always say that to myself. I'm like, you're prepared. You just keep going, keep flowing, keep doing it. But you're kind of on the edge of failure as well, like that. And then
Yeah.
you spoke about it a lot. You spoke about you got to be willing to lose to win. Like
Hmm.
you have to be happy, just go out there and do everything you can to win, but also go, when you finish that race, know that you couldn't have done any more. I remember
Right.
just doing that race and I was so close. I nearly had a fall right towards the end when I started thinking about someone else, because
Yeah.
Bruno was quite close and Daniel was
Right.
quite close. And I just for a second thought about them. And that's when I wobbled and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that was nearly your race over. And
Yeah.
then I just went back straight into like the moment. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just you. Because especially in like canoeing and kayaking, you're really doing a time trial against yourself. You are
Yeah.
racing people, and those people can
Right.
push you and you can
Right.
get affected by their race. But at the end of the day, you're just trying to do the best you on the day. And if the
Y-
best you gets across, you cross the finish line first, then you're a
Right.
champion.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I do think that it, it's precisely that, but it's also a little bit of that uh, you know late effort, finish type thing,
Yep.
because a lot of the time you've done that for in a 1,000-meter race for 950 meters, but you realize that there's somebody right there,
Yep.
and it's like, okay, now how do I do a little bit even more? And so then it becomes more than just a time trial where you're trying to find that little extra gear. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, by and large, it's a time trial, um, and I would also say that because the races are shorter, when you do make a mistake, like the mistake you made briefly in that distance race in China, um, your margin for error is a lot smaller, I think, in a shorter race. It's it can be more difficult to recover, just because the speeds at which the boats are going, um, the the how short the race is. Like I can think of a couple of races where I allowed my focus to wander from what I was doing to the result or to where somebody else is, and it's real hard to get that focus back in a sprint race.
Yep.
Um, and in a distance race, I think it is a little easier, I think it's probably harder to keep your focus because it's a longer period of time, right? Like for you to have the same level of focus for like an hour race that I could have in a 2-minute race or a 4-minute race is like, it's hard enough for 2 minutes or 4 minutes. How do you do it for an hour? You know?
Yeah.
So that's really hard. But then again, when you do let your mind wander, and your mind gets tired. So it's probably natural. Your mind will wander a bit. But it's, like as long as total disaster doesn't befall you when you let your focus slip, it's probably a little bit easier to get it back when the tempo is not quite as high, when, you know what I mean? Like it's just,
Well, it's part of the game. When you're talking about distance racing, you've got to stay focused for so long. And I know during races, like if my mind will wander slightly, I'll try and bring it back. And mine will want to slightly try and bring it back. Like you're just thinking about like random stuff, like what you ate for dinner or like how your flight was when you got over there. And like, you're sort of like, no, you're racing. Like, what are you doing? Like stay focused. And then in that moment, you might lose 0.5 or you might lose a second but you can you've got time to make it back.
Right.
But the key thing is when you're doing a 200-meter race, it takes 2 minutes. Or a 500-meter race, it takes 2 minutes.
Right.
That 0.5 costs you maybe 2 places. Like you don't get time to make that back. So it is quite critical when you are doing those sprint style races, especially when you're in your own lane. Like it's a bit different when we're doing what we do at the moment in SUP, when you're doing 200 meters with like heaps of guys and you can sort of play off them and you can kind of strategize it. But yeah, just like one little wobble can blow your whole race. So you've got to really be staying in the moment that whole time. Like for me, so you went to, that was your first Olympics in LA and you won. Then you went to 3 more. What was it like going back to those 3 more? I know you got 4th in 88. I'm not sure, was that in the 500 as well?
That was 1,000 meter.
Yeah,
so
and then you got...
so I came 4th, and that was what I was saying to you earlier about having the best race that I think I could have had on that day, but it just wasn't good enough that day, and that was disappointing. I mean, you go like, so for all those years I used to write, like future world and Olympic champion. And then when I done it, then the whole thing was like, okay, well, I'm going to be multiple Olympic champion. I'm going to go and do it again. And never in my mind did I contemplate that I wouldn't, like at minimum, be on the podium. And I came 4th. I was 3rd most of the race. And the Bulgarian guy was actually on the wash. He was in the middle of his lane, but he was on the wash of the Russian guy. And in a strictly non-political sports world, he would have been disqualified because it's against the rules in ICF racing. But I mean, this was 1988, and that didn't happen. But like I was really disappointed. But what can you do? Like it was, I couldn't have done anything better. I think the one thing that could have been better is the preparation. We raced, that was, I think, October 1st or 2nd. And I had never raced that late in the season before. Usually we were always racing in August. And I was faster in August. So, we kind of blew the periodization a bit. And so that was disappointing. It was one of those situations where I think a hard thing to do as an athlete, and I think as a coach, and this experience actually really sticks with me when I'm coaching like high level athletes, is that you have to kind of know when to stop pushing for more. And you got to kind of know when, like, okay, we're good. Let's maintain this level and be fresh enough to, rise to the level, an even higher level on race day. And I think the mistake that we made in in 88 was that around the end of August, I was going faster than I'd ever gone in 1,000-meter. And we made the mistake of doing like another 2-week hard cycle to try to just, you're getting greedy, just trying to push a little harder and maybe get a little bit more, a little bit faster. And, like when you're training at that level, a lot of time with good intensity, I think a lot of times the margin for failure or for doing too much is really fine.
Yep.
And when you cross that boundary between the right amount and too much, and it involves your nervous system, it can be a real problem. And I pretty quickly realized that we'd made a mistake. I would say probably maybe just as we're getting ready to leave for Seoul, that suddenly I wasn't feeling as sharp as I had felt, in the previous 3-week cycle. My paces were off a little bit in training, a little bit harder to dig deep in training. I was a little bit irritable, and all the classic signs of when you've just maybe pushed a little too hard and overstretched or overreached. And so it was hard racing, kind of trying to put that out of your mind and approach like I mentioned to you earlier, it's always it's fun racing when you have total confidence in your preparation. And when you suspect that you might have made a mistake in the training, and but you're trying to block that out and approach the race with the same confidence as if you felt that you did everything perfect in training. It's hard to race in that situation, but I think I did a good job of kind of like leaving all that on shore and just and basically just digging deep and going for it. It just wasn't enough, and I came fourth. I gotta show you something here. Let me so this right here, that's the aluminum medal.
Yeah.
Fourth. So it's the top of a beer can. Yeah. And my teammates took me out that night in Seoul. They'd taken a beer can and broken it and taken all the sharp aluminum off it, so that there was just a disc, and they put a string through it. And they got me drunk in a bar in downtown Seoul, stood me on a chair, and put that around my neck for coming fourth. So I still got that.
Yeah.
And,
it's good that your team got around you. I guess you would have been disappointed at the time, but do you feel like you, in a way, raced the race before you raced it, and you mentally kind of put yourself out of it due to the effects? Like, I know when you're training sprinting, we used to do a session with Vince. I can't remember his last name. He's a really good 200-meter sprinter, won like 10 200-meter K1 World Championship titles. And we used to do this session where you just do 10 starts on like 7 minutes or something like that. And we do 20 strokes. And I'd finish that session, I'd be wrecked for like a week. That whole different type of system that you're working depending on what event you're doing. I can understand how you would have been worn out a little bit. But yeah, back to my question. Do you think you kind of raced the race before you raced it in a way?
Well, no, I think it would be fair to say that I left my best paddling on the training water that year, because so we went to Europe, and I did really well in all the World Cups. And I came home, and I was going faster than I'd ever gone. We paddle on this shitty little river that's 2.5 kilometers long, and the 1,000 course isn't even perfectly straight. You go around a little bend at the finish, and it's muddy, heavy water. and I was doing times on that river in, you know, heavy water that were like, you know, good enough to be on the podium.
Yeah.
And I was doing them in training. And, you know, like I told you, it's the kind of thing where I think of this now when when I'm coaching high level athletes. And it's like, when you get to a point, you know, when you like, when you see somebody who's at a point where they're at that level, then you got to nurture that. You can't just keep flogging it and trying to get a little bit faster, because you're really close to the edge of going past, you know, going too far and falling off the edge. You know, you're really close to that, and because it's such a fine line, and I think that's what happened to me. So I don't know that you know, like, I wouldn't say that I was, you know, more intense in my training than I was on race day.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I was more excited to paddle in my training than I was on race day, but I would certainly say that my body wasn't as up to the challenge on race day as it was, you know, easily in some of that training in late August. Like, we raced at our nationals, and there was no one who was near me at our nationals at that time. And I did a 4:12 in a roaring headwind. And that was the time that won in Seoul in a similar headwind.
Yeah.
And I did a 4:18 or 4:20 even. And so I just didn't have the oomph in my stroke, you know, I just didn't have it. And, you know, that fatigue that you feel when you do all those starts, it's such a neuromuscular thing. It's your nervous system.
Yeah.
And it just takes, when you overtax it, it takes time to recover. And you know, it's hard for it to recover when you're still training and racing.
Yeah.
You know,
and you want to overtax it.
And you best when you actually sit on your, you know, you sit on the couch for a week, and you know, so yeah, it was really disappointing. But you know, I mean, the mistake came from good intentions, right? It was like, you know, wow, we're really good. Like, let's be a little bit better. We'll win this thing. And the mistake was that, wow, we're really good. Let's just maintain this and try to go there relaxed and just find that flow, and with the belief that it'll all come out on the race course. And instead we pushed a little harder. And I sometimes think, you know, like the guys that I you know are able to, are the guys that win races, like, you know, 8 times out of 10 are the ones that they've just got that extra sense of self-belief and self-confidence to be able to say, okay, I've done enough. I don't need to go faster. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm good. I'm just going to put it in a bottle and open it up on race day, and I'm going to be good. I know I'll be good. And I think that it's tough, right? Because as an athlete, it's your work ethic that gets you to that level. It's working harder than other people that gets you to that level. It's not shying away from a challenge and the hard work that gets you to that level. But once you're at that level, I think more often than not, the better decision is to say, okay, we're good, you know, and just maintain it. Just maintain it. And just let I was trying to tell this to Connor a couple of years ago when in 2018, when I first started working with him, that you know, he had a hard race every 8 weeks, and like a race that was a priority event, like I want to win this every 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And so the racing became the training, you know, like a race where you're trying to perform for a result actually became a training event for the next race where you're trying to perform for a result. And a lot of the training in between was, you know, 4 weeks of base training, 3 weeks of sprint training, but only a couple of really hard efforts a week.
Yeah.
And then a week of peaking. And then it was the next race. There wasn't a lot of training because the racing became the training. And so I do think that when you get to the highest level, it does take a gear shift in your mind to go to sort of fight your instincts, which are work, work, work.
Yeah.
And to start to think more about rest, 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 and have the confidence to say, no, you know what? Like 6 pieces is good enough today. I don't need to do all 8. I'm good. And it's hard for a lot of athletes, myself included, at that time, to make those decisions because if it's going against your instincts.
Absolutely. And I think personally, I've learned that over time. Maybe 5 years ago, I wasn't that guy, but I remember listening to a podcast. It was a South African triathlete, and I can't think of his name. And he was talking about how when he's recovering, he's getting the edge on his competitors. Because he was talking about at the time how all his competitors would just flog themselves to death, and they just train and train and train, and they think that they're getting better. And his philosophy was, well, I know when I'm at the edge and it's time to have a rest. And really, since I listened to that conversation, that was when my mind switched, and I was like, well, if I'm knackered and I think like you can sort of like I look at myself in waves when I'm like training, and I'm hopefully like waving and I'm gradually moving up when I'm like doing my periodization and I'm building. But sometimes when you start to wave up and when you start to come back down, I've got to the point where I know in myself that I stopped there. Whereas before I used to allow myself to keep coming down, then I get sick. And I used to get tonsillitis a lot. And I used to just think that I had to train. And then another, I guess, key influence on my sort of sporting career was Shannon Eckstein, is Ironman. And he used to say, as I've gotten older, I've gotten smarter, and I still train really hard, but when I know that I'm about to fall off that cliff, he stops and he recovers instead. And that was something that I learned, especially in SUP racing, because and what you spoke about, Connor, was kind of resonated with me because like I was racing like 5 weeks in a row, like, and your racing was, I'd make my race the hardest session of the week, and the rest of the sessions are just recovery. I might have one session where I do a few key intervals, and then just to know that I can still get to that speed, and then it was just recovery and then peak, and then recovery and then peak. And it was such a weird way to do it, obviously coming from a hiking background where you're training like specific periodization, like you've got your endurance phase, your strength phase, your speed phase, you know. We didn't have that opportunity in stand up, especially not when you're racing every 8 weeks or every 2 weeks, you know, like you just can't do it.
It's a challenge to I remember, looking at his schedule that first year and thinking like, whoa, like how am I going to do this? Because it's canoeing is a very linear periodization. Like it's world championships or Olympics at the end of the year. And then it's, maybe some World Cups or selection races, in May or June. But you got lots of time to be fast at those and then sort of go back to base preparation and then do another peak. And in SUP racing, there's important races all the time. And so I just found that, periodizing it by blocks and hoping that there's 6 to 8 weeks between the biggest races, the real priority races, because then you can actually do like a little mini block. And in races where you're like, if you're on the Euro Tour and everyone's in the world is in Europe for 4 weeks straight, well, then you got to approach it differently. It's like you were saying, it's like the race is the training and everything else is just, travel and recover with maybe a couple of hard pieces just to stay sharp, on like a Tuesday, so that you're, and then the rest is just recovery for the weekend. And, the other thing that I've learned too is that, like I really place high value on the recovery week. So, I don't know what you're doing with the programs that you're setting for your athletes or for yourself, but, like in canoeing, we used to generally go with like a 3-week cycle and then a recovery week. And I found that for most athletes in SUP, either because they're a little bit, maybe a little bit older, a little bit less well trained, or maybe it's just because I think SUP's harder than canoe kayak, just because it's a heavier pull.
Yeah.
You know, like the board is shorter and it's fatter, and like even our 19.75 sprints are fat compared to your kayak,
Sure.
and so it's just a heavier load when you're pulling, and that's hard on your muscles. It's hard on your nervous system to be
Yeah.
pulling that hard all the time. And so I tend to do every third week is a recovery week.
Mm.
And I really have gotten, like, every year I get like heavier on the recovery. So I'll cut the load by well more than 50% in most sessions. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's like 25%.
Yeah.
Like I cut it down to 25%. And you know, I it's hard. Athletes are like, whoa, like I gotta, what do you mean? I'm only going to do 3 pieces when normally they do 12.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, no, you got to trust me. Like this isn't enough. Like this isn't going to get you, you're not going to get out of shape this week. There's well enough work in here for you to maintain your fitness.
Yeah.
But I want your muscles rested. I want your nervous system rested. I want your connective tissue rested. I want you to consolidate any gains you made. And the only way you can do that is by actually really taking your foot off the gas.
Mm.
And then that's an investment in quality in the 2
Yeah.
weeks that are come after that, because it's the quality that provides a stimulus that fosters growth, that fosters improvement. And it's not just going and grinding out work. It's like maximal quality provides a stimulus for improvement. And you can't do that level of quality if you're not fresh going into that. And
Absolutely.
so it's really changed. Like and then I think back to what I did late in my career as an athlete. So when, I changed coaches in after 88, we had, our team got a guy over from Hungary, and he's a great coach, a great friend, was a great paddler. I used to race against him. And so then he stayed in Hungary, and he stayed in Canada, and his kids ended up racing for Canada. And you probably know one of them, Tommy Budai, right? So it's his father.
Yes, of course.
And but one of the mistakes that he and I made is that I'm at that time, I'm like a 29, 30, 31, 32-year-old athlete training for my 4th Olympics. And there's no one else my age on the team. And there's no one else even close to my age on the team. It's his sons, who are like 17, 18, 19, and a couple of guys who are 21, like all these young guys.
Yeah.
And there's one program.
Yeah.
And as I love him, like Thomas Sr., but that was a mistake to throw that kind of work at me and make me do that with those kids, because as an older athlete, I knew how to go harder than they did. They hadn't discovered that yet, hadn't learned that yet. And I would go harder in the training. And every day I had like a 20-year-old taking a run at me in training. And I'm competitive, and I embrace the challenge.
Yeah.
And there was never enough recovery. And when you're a 20-year-old, you can handle that.
Yeah.
But when you're, a 30-year-old, you can't.
Yeah.
And and I even think back to it, like I noticed differences in my tolerance for work and recovery at around 21 years old, 25, 26 years old, and 29, 30 years old.
Yep.
Each one of those stages, my ability to recover, my ability to work harder, like higher quality, increased, but my need for more recovery time also increased. I would not recover as quickly.
Yeah.
And so that destroyed me. And I actually didn't make my 4th Olympics. I came second at the selections, and that was it. It was over. And and I don't know. I mean, you'll never know if things would have worked out differently if I'd I'd been able to get him to kind of, you know, set up something separate for me rather than just doing it all as a group. And I
Yeah.
understand why we all went as a group, because it was good for the kids, and that was important because they're the next generation. And and I could have, you know, just said, no, hey, I'm not going to do this. This is too much. You know, I could have taken more ownership of it, and I didn't.
Yeah.
But you know, I learned a lot from that experience, and I really try to apply those lessons as a coach.
That's really kind of interesting for when I was training in the AIS or the QAS or whatever it is down at Pizzey Park, what they call it now, so at the top level program. What really used to frustrate me was because I came into kayaking at a later age. I came in at like 21, whereas like a lot of the guys in my are like 13. And a lot of the stuff that I felt like I needed, like team boat skills or like maybe some more core strength, a little bit more leg work, like all these things that weren't really built into the program. The program was built around like a 25-year-old peak level athlete, someone who's already been to the Olympics, and it was based around them. But that's why one of the reasons why when I stopped kayaking, I actually started coaching myself, because I realized there's so many things that are missing in this program that I personally need. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got, obviously, as an institute, you've got to look at it as a broad approach. You can't be writing individual plans for all these different people, and it's an elitist program. But I was like, I'm not getting what I need. I need this. I need this. Like, I need to be doing this. And maybe if I did things differently, or if I wanted to do more kayaking, I probably could have stepped away and done my own program. But at the time, you couldn't do that. If you weren't in the program, in an institute, and probably the
Right.
same thing now, you don't get a
Yeah.
you don't get a shot.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, I and that's kind of, you were kind of, you know, like in that scenario, I would have been like what the program is tailored to,
yeah,
and you would have been like the kids,
yeah,
you know, that needed a bit more of the stuff that you didn't get because when you weren't paddling as a teenager.
yeah,
But you know, I think what happens in a lot of these canoe kayak programs, national team programs, is that you know, they have a group and they have you know, X number of athletes, and they have a coach, and the coach trains them all, and the best ones survive.
yeah,
And if you got a lot of depth in your country, you can afford to make a lot of mistakes with your program, and but the ones who survive, like if you're in the Hungarian team, they have great depth, you know. So
yeah,
you know, they might lose a bunch of athletes that you know, like fall short of their potential because they got basically chewed up by the program. But the ones who survive are going to be at a real high level, and
sure,
they can
yeah,
afford to make mistakes because they got a lot of athletes. You get into these smaller programs, and you can't afford to make the mistakes. Um, but it's hard, like you say, it's hard because you've got one coach and you got all these athletes, and you can't have a different program for everybody because then you don't have a training group.
yeah,
And you know, it's just and there's only so many hours in a day that a coach has to, you know, probably what in your case, what should have happened is there should have been a, you know, 2 workouts in the morning and 2 workouts in the afternoon that the coach sat in the motorboat, basically doubled his time. And
yeah.
the
No one wants
first
to do that.
workout should have been for like more of a development group that needs to do the stuff that you needed
Yeah,
to do. And the second, you know, session could be for Kenny Wallace and those guys who are already at the top level.
yeah,
Um, but it doesn't always happen that way. Like it's just there's limited resources, and
yeah,
but then you get into something that's totally individual, and you know, and then you can do what you feel you need, right? And
yeah,
it's all about you now. So um, but I
yeah.
have to
And
say,
that's
I was just going to say, I have to say that, like, one of the things that I think is a hard thing to do is to coach yourself,
mm,
because you know, it's um, there's a lot, you got to be super confident and sure in what you're doing, and you got to have a real good understanding of yourself and your body. And like I was saying earlier, you have to have the confidence to know when to say when, like when you're going to say, okay, this is good. I'm going to nurture this now rather than try to like take it to another level. And not like, you know, honestly, like compliments to you seriously, because I've always been impressed that, you know, you're coaching yourself. Like a lot of people in stand-up paddling are coaching themselves. Like I understand that, but you've done it really well. And then you've been able to do it really well for other people too. But it's the hardest thing to do because like it's too many people. There's a lot of people that have a hard time doing it because of the second guessing that goes in, you know, and to be able to chart a course and to know, okay, this is the periodization, this is what I'm aiming for, this is the plan, to follow the plan, except when you're listening to your body and you know that, okay, today that's enough. The plan called for 10 pieces and I did 6, but that's enough. You know, like, man, that's like, it's hard. And it's like, it's hard for athletes to do when they have a coach who's telling them to stop or telling them they need to do more. But it's hard to be, you know, the athlete when the coach is yourself, you know, like that's like, it's really impressive that you've been able to do it as well as you have. And obviously it explains why you're having so much success coaching others too, but it's what you're doing is not easy.
I think for me, it was all about the ownership. I wanted to take full ownership of what I was doing. I wanted to control how I was training, like when I was training, how often I was training. And when I got to a race, if I did poorly, I only had myself to blame.
Right.
And that sort of ownership really was something that I didn't have in the other sports. Like I always was like, coach is making me do this. I don't really think I should be doing this, but I'm doing it because I have to do it. And that they want me to do it, and but I'm not really sure. And when I got to step away from that and got to coach myself, I got to go, well, I need to do this, 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 and this. And the thing that was, I guess, something that I realized when I was going through was I was happy to fail. Like, 'cause I was happy to fail because I knew that whatever I failed in, I knew I could get better at. So like whatever Chrissy hates it, but when I finish races, I'd be like, I just sit there and just like talk to her. I probably talk at her for like hours. And I'd just be like, just going, I did this. Like, what did I do wrong? Like, what can I do in the preparation? Like, why did this happen? This happened here. Like this, and like, I go on for like a few hours, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm done, and I just move on. Same after the world champs. Like, I sat there, I went back to my room. I was like, okay, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. I did this wrong, and then I got to the end of my conclusion, and I was like, well, based on the circumstances and the information that I had, I couldn't have done any more. But I now know where I can improve, and I know where I need to work at. And I do that for every race. I don't write things down necessarily. I don't necessarily do it, but I'll just constantly just hammer myself until I work out and I think I'm an analytical thinker. So I really want to work out what's going on. Like I'll never accept the result. Like even if I win, I'll like, okay, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. I did this wrong.
Right.
And I'll always be looking at my weaknesses. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I need more speed. I need more turns. I need this. Like when I first did my races, going from kayaking world champs in Russia, in Moscow, and then going to, I think it must have been the Salt Creek Battle of the Paddle, the last one ever. I could paddle in a straight line, but every count I'd fall off. And it used to frustrate all the guys that I was paddling around with like Danny Ching and like all these top guys at the time. They get frustrated with me. I'm like, well, paddle faster than me then. Like, it's not my problem. Like, if I'm falling off at the can, like you should, if you're way better than me, you should be in front of me. But I'm not going to apologize for falling off. Like that's your problem, not mine.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, well, I got to turn lots. And then it was like, I got to work on my surf skills, even though I understood the knowledge from the surf life-saving background and, just all these things. And I think coming down to coaching and what you spoke about with different athletes, I came away from like the periodization cycles a little bit as well, because it didn't really suit my program. Yes, like in the off season, I could do that. Like, so when I started training in January, February, March, and then I start traveling, like that's probably the best I'm going to be all season. I'm going to be as fit as possible. And then I'm going to go away and try and work out how I'm going to perform week in, week out, because it's not it's not the way that they did it in the kayaking or the canoeing world. That you can't train like that because you're racing all the time. So that's something that I learned to really listen to my body. So if my body said I'm really tired today, I just sleep in.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't feel bad about it for a second. And I wouldn't try and catch up the session either. I'd be like, I just couldn't do that session, and now I'm going to be better for it for the next session, because the quality that you spoke about as well is where I'm going to get the benefits. But if I don't get the recovery to be able to do that quality, then I'm going to be racing at 90%. Like, and I always say you can never race at 100%. Your best race might be at 97% of your potential or 95% of your potential. Right. And I say to a lot of the people I coach, I was like, race at 90%. Just if you can race at 90%, like, you're going to basically do your best performance, because there's so many contributing factors that aren't going to allow you to be at your best, whether that's another athlete, whether that's things that have happened in the lead up, whether that's your preparation, like all these different things that, or you didn't get enough sleep, your jet lag, all these different factors. But if you can race at 90%, you'll generally do better than if you try and go max. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I learned as well. And I guess just going through that cycle multiple times, like when you're doing so much racing, you just learn that you can't control everything. And that was something I learned from one of my good friends, Corey Hill. He's an ocean ski paddler, world champ. When we first started traveling back in 2010, he always said to me, he's like, I don't have a foot plate. Sorry, I don't have a foot pad. I don't have a seat pad. I don't have a water pack that I need to use. I don't have a paddle I need to use. I just go out and race. And whatever I have, I'm going to do my best with. And that really resonated with me, because I'm like, well, all I can control is what I can control in the race and in the moment. And if I can stay in the moment and not think about anything else, I can think about it afterwards and do the breakdowns like I spoke about. But if you can just stay in the moment and do the job that you need to do, your preparation is not as important, but I guess we're talking about mental versus physical here.
Yeah. I mean, preparation is always important, because that's just kind of like, that sort of determines, how much horsepower you have under the hood, and what kind of fuel economy you're going to get. And you know what I mean? Like that, there's no shortcut. You got to do the preparation. But I agree with you that I mean, you can be like at, like your very, very peak form, or you could be like, physically, you could be well off your peak form, like, 3, 4, 5% kind of off what you deem as your fittest peak form. But if your mind's in the right place, and as you say, you're totally in the moment, and you're not you're blocking out any distraction, and you're only, because I've said the same thing to anyone that I've ever coached, is, control what you can control, and just don't worry about anything else. If you do that kind of stuff well, it tends to make up for the fact that maybe your current physical state isn't optimal. And I can think back in my life, I've had races that have been fantastic races, and I'm surprised that I had a fantastic race, because I didn't think my physical form was that great.
Yeah. But
everything else was bang on.
Yeah.
And then occasionally you have a race where you think everything is perfect physically, but you make a mistake in one of those other areas, and it compromises all that great physical preparation. So there's a lot of truth to that. But I do think that it's worth always striving for, when it matters most, to have the optimal physical preparation, and then the optimal mental, the optimal, have it mean a lot to you too, have that just be, I'm not a very spiritual guy in the least, but I do believe that when you give those very, very best performances, that you're digging so deep, like it's more than just your body and your mind. It's like it's coming from deep, deep inside you when what you're able to put onto the paddle.
And I think, I agree with like a lot of, like most of what you're saying as well. Like, but I think when you're coming down to something like stand-up paddling, when there is so many more variables, and like you've got like the wind and the other competitors, and like you got like you're playing with the minds of other people, especially in pack racing. Like you can really make and break people. Like you can, like I used to really enjoy it, and work people out and try and like hurt them and like like work out like if someone's a really fast sprinter, if I can like cook them for like 6 or 7 like attacks during the race, like they didn't have a sprint in them to finish, like they just
Right.
couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
So those are the things that I really enjoy working out. But you're right, like I agree also with the preparation. You've got to have as big a horsepower under it, because that's where a lot of your confidence comes from, and that your preparation is where your confidence comes from. And I'm not discrediting that at all, because something like kayak and canoe racing, you can almost dictate your race down to the stroke and the stroke rate and the how much glide you're getting and all that type of stuff. So the only thing that's different in something like stand up, until we go that way, which I think we will with the ICF, they will end up putting us in lanes and that'll all happen. But I think with the way that SUP has been for the last 6 years is similar to what I guess surf lifesaving has been to me, and that's been my background. So you have the best physical preparation, but there was always an amount of luck or amount of something that could happen in the surf, where you can jump in a rip, or you can run the bank better than somebody else, or you can catch a wave past people and who will just flog themselves and beating you by 15 seconds like on the course, but then you've got on the wave.
Absolutely, 100%. But I still think like you can't train for, you can't like, these things are going to happen. I mean, how can I say it? Like, if you're experienced and you know what to look for, and you have good, like you have a race plan where you can, you know how you can beat other competitors, you know how you can race certain competitors. These things are all things that you can still control. Like you can control it, where you start and a beach starts, so that you can benefit from a rip. You don't, or there's things that you can do to make better luck for yourself. But at the end of the day, there's luck. The nature of luck is that a lot of it you can't control. It just happens, right? Having said that, you can't, when you're training day to day, you can't prepare for all these like eventualities that could happen on race day. All you can do when you're training is prepare the physical, and so that you're as well prepared as you can possibly be. And then you got to hope that all these crazy environmental things and other competitors banging into you and that type of thing goes your way too, right? Like it's a culmination of everything. And what I would say too is, like I've said this many times, is that I used to think that canoe and kayak was a really complex sport. When you look at the movement patterns, and you look at the fact that you're on water, using an implement to grab water, to pull yourself to the paddle, push yourself past it, like that's how it's so much more difficult than running on land, where you're pushing off the ground, or riding a bike. There's so many degrees of freedom in your movement that it just having good technique is much more complex than in many other sports. There's a balance factor. It's a power and power endurance event. It's a very aerobic event, but it's also got if you start racing 500 meters and 200 meters, there's a high anaerobic component too. Like, it's really just in terms of the fitness, in terms of the strength, in terms of the skill, it's very complex. And then I got into stand-up paddling, and it makes canoe kayak look easy, because compared to canoe, I have to do things on two sides now. I spent the first 35 years, 40 years of my paddling, 35 years of paddling only on the right. Now I got to paddle left and right, and I don't just do it in flat water. I got to do it through the surf. I got to surf back in. I got to be able to downwind in big conditions. I got to be able to go upwind in the same conditions. I got to go with those waves coming on my side. I got to do it left and right side. I got to be able to draft. I got to be able to sprint. I got to be like, it's just so many things. And it's a more complex movement pattern, because I'm standing up. Like canoe, you use your lower body, but you're locked in this position. Now I got to walk around the board. I got to change my stance. I got to, like, it's on a whole other level of complexity.
Yeah.
And, the cool thing, why I love it so much, and why I go and do it every day, is that, I'm doing well with my fitness. Like I kind of am holding, like around, I'm probably around 90% of what I was when I was, fitness, and most fitness markers of what I was when I was, in my 30s. And that sounds really good until you figure out what 90% of a 4-minute race is, and all of a sudden I'm like 20 seconds behind where I would have been, right, as a 30-year-old. But I'm kind of holding my own in terms of fitness. I'm not going to get faster by being more fit. I just got to sort of slow down the decline. But I get faster every year because I get better. I start to answer more of these riddles about, the complexity of the sport. I start to learn more about I get better paddling in the left. I get better reading the water. I get better, even if I can read the water, I get better, making my board go to where I want it to go so that I can take advantage of what I'm seeing. There's just so much complexity in stand-up paddling that that's what's really cool about it, is that, there's so many areas to, like, as a coach, helping other people. There's so many areas where you can help them improve.
And I think that's what I'm trying to say with the preparation thing, that you can't really control the factors, a lot of these factors that we are racing in, because there are so many. And I think if you are mentally able to sustain and like control in your mind that you can't control that factor, so all you can do is try and use the wind or use the thing or
Yep.
forget about what's just happened and move on. And I think
Mhm.
that's why SUP is more physical than any sport that I've ever done, but B, it's really more mentally demanding as well, because there is so many things that you have to know and have to learn, and you're learning a lot of it on the fly as well.
Yep.
And until you've
Yep.
done a lot of races and a lot of experiences, and the athletes you're competing against, that's when you can really kind of bring it all together.
Yeah.
That's why
No,
I say you can't ever get 100% perfect
yeah,
race in this sport.
no, yeah, no, I would agree with that. And it is different because like you said, canoe kayak was, I mean, yes, conditions could come into play, but usually the conditions were pretty favorable, and they were, usually they're equal across the course. And
Mm,
so it's just, do what you did in training,
yeah,
right? Only just do it a little better because it's race day. You're excited.
yeah.
But
And then
but stand-up paddling it's a whole other thing. Yeah.
and,
I like
and
that.
stand-up paddling is sorry.
I was just going to say, I never thought of telling somebody that, you're only going to be kind of like, 90% of what you can, like, because of all these factors you can't control. I
Mm,
actually, I've never thought of telling somebody that, but I really like that.
mm. And that's what I tell myself, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'll go back to sort of when I was early 20s and thinking like, oh, well, all that went wrong and I did 100% of my best,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
realized over time that's just never possible. And
Right.
something that actually I heard secondhand from someone, Ironman guy Trevor Hendy, and he tells a lot of his athletes from Surface Paradise and Surf Lifesaving to always race at 90%. And I sort
Mhm.
of adapted that over time, because I was like, well, yeah, it's so true. Like you can never do your absolute best performance, because the conditions in these, especially in surf lifesaving or in stand up, unless you start doing 200-meter races, as I mentioned before, but you can never control all these factors. So you just have to do your
Right.
best given the circumstances. And
Right.
if you make a mistake or something happens, you just move forward, move forward.
Right. Right. Right.
Whereas
Right.
in whereas in a 200-meter sprint, like you don't get that opportunity. You don't forget how to forget and move forward. Like if you make that mistake, you kind of can't really recover. You can try and do your best to just to reignite that race plan that you had. But I find in stand up, a lot of especially in distance racing, I have like no race plan anymore. I used to like try and come into the race plan, but
Yeah.
I have I have there's like 50 to 100 different things that could happen.
Right. I
I
know. I
just go
agree.
every minute you just move
Yeah.
forward.
No, 100%. I agree with that. I tell people that I'm coaching to have like a pre-race plan, like, so you know what the heck you're going to do before the race starts, because a lot of people are lost without that, right? They're looking around at other competitors and they get all nervous. And if you got a plan you can stick to, it helps you keep focused and it helps you keep from getting nervous. But in terms of a race plan, it's really you can have the best plan and it's out the window, you know, in the first 30 strokes, right? Because something happened.
Yeah.
And there's just too many variables to plan for. I agree with that entirely.
One of the things I tell myself and I tell people, I'm like, have a race plan, expect the race plan to fail, and then win
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But like,
Yeah.
like try and start with one, but don't like put your
Yeah.
whole race on that, because
Yeah,
more likely than not, it's not going to go that way.
Yeah.
But give it your best shot.
Yeah.
So give me an idea. Why did you get involved in stand-up paddling? Like you went obviously a long time doing C1, and then when did you know you were going to retire or step away from that? And when did you want to step into SUP? And also, I know we're going really long, so if you want to like,
it's that's cool. It's all good. No, so like I raced until 96, and then I didn't make the team, and so that was pretty much the end of my high level career. And I got a bunch of my paddling buddies and former national team guys, a couple of guys that were on their way up to the national team. We went to Hong Kong and raced Dragon Boat. We're the first team non-Asian team that ever managed to win their big Dragon Boat festival. So that was pretty cool. And we raced that together for a bunch of years, say from 96 to 2004. We won a bunch of world championships and basically just had fun with, like, 20 other guys that are good friends of mine that I paddled with all, most of my life, and another like 12 girls from the mixed team, and just traveled all around the world and raced Dragon Boat, which was a lot of fun. And I coached canoeing at the canoe club, and so I still paddled C1 with the kids that I was coaching. And all I could do was, like, I go and do workouts with the kids, and I go and do the time controls with them, and it was kind of fun to chart my decline, And but around 2007, 2008, I got into one-man outrigger and started racing that, and went to Hawaii a couple of times, did a Molokai to Oahu solo, and so got, exposed to the ocean, which was really cool. And then it's probably around 2008, I got a phone call from Jimmy Terrell, who I've known since 1981 when we raced each other at the Junior World Championships in C1. And he's like, yeah, Larry, I got this really cool thing I'm into. It's stand-up paddling. It's like you stand on like a surfboard and you get a really long paddle, and you'd be great at it. You'd really love it. And I kind of blew him off because I was like, I'm kind of into this outrigger thing, and I don't have time to get into something else. And it wasn't anywhere in Canada. And I hadn't really ever surfed before. And so I said, maybe I'll try it sometime, but I'm too busy to really get into it right now. And so I didn't even give it a second thought until I was at an outrigger race here locally in 2010. And there was a guy who had stand-up paddleboards there, and he's selling them. And a guy who used to paddle kayak. And he had, they were like Bark, it was a Bark 12.6 Bark competitor. And he goes, Larry, you got to try this. Try this paddleboard. And I go, I don't want to try it, Mike. I'm good. He goes, no, try it. I goes, like I said, I don't want to try it. Like, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm here to race outrigger. I'm good. He goes, no, come on, try it. Just in the lagoon over there. You don't have to go in the lake. Just in the lagoon. Just try it. I'll carry it to the water for you. I was like, okay, carry it to the water. So he put it in the water. I stepped on it, paddled only on the right, did a little circle, came back, and I said, okay, there, I tried it. He goes, take the board. And I go, I don't want the board. Like, I don't want it. And he goes, no, take it. It's like, so I was like, look, dude, I'm growing out of paddling. Like, I don't want to invest more money into paddling toys. And I'm really proud of myself that I'm sort of like weaning myself from paddling.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, take it. Come on. You don't have to pay me anything. Just take it. You'll see if you like it. So just to shut him up, I said, okay, put it in the car. So I took it back to the canoe club and I put it in the canoe club. And it sat there for like 3 weeks. And then that season, our nationals were in Regina, which is in the prairies, like in the middle of Canada, like 3,000 kilometers away. It'd be like going across Australia almost to have your nationals. So we had to put all the boats in a transport trailer to get them out to the nationals. So none of the kids I was coaching had their canoes. So I gave my C1 to one of the kids, and then I thought, I'll take this stand-up paddleboard thing out and just watch the kids do their workout.
Yeah.
So I put it in the water and I put my GPS on it with duct tape, and just so I could see, how I could time the kids as they went by. And so I started paddling up the river, only on the right side. And but I was looking at the paces I was doing. And so I came home that night and I went on the internet and I looked at some race results. And there's a race that was in North Carolina that had been there in that March. It's called the Cold Stroke Classic. It was all flat water, and down in Wrightsville Beach. And I looked at the times, and it was like E.J. Johnson and Byron Kurt and a couple other guys. And I looked at their times, and then I looked at the distance, and I did a calculation, figured out what the pace was, and I go like, fuck, I was doing that pace. Like I could do that pace. So I started paddling it a bit, and started to try to go out in the lake, and that was an adventure. But I ended up going to the next Cold Stroke Classic in January 2011, and I went and I paddled the whole race on the right side because every time I went to the left, I felt tippy, and I almost won overall. I got beat by a 14-foot board. The local champ, Chris Hill, beat me by not much.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I went back down there in my March break, and I paddled with Chris, and he actually took me downwinding, and it was like 9 miles and pretty, like, kind of typical like Carolina when it's firing pretty good conditions, not like anything huge, but not flat. And I was on my, the longest I stood in the board for at any one length of time was like 2 minutes. And I must have fallen off like in a 9-mile downwinder, I don't know, 150 times. Did a lot of it on my knees. I was battered and bruised. And finally, I could see him on the beach with his board and his son. And I was they were about 800 meters ahead of me. And I just turned into shore and dragged the board the rest of the way along the beach. I was done. Yeah. And I was so humbled. And so that was like the second to last day I was there. And I contemplated going home that night because I figured, like, you know what, I'm not really cut out for this. And the next day, I hadn't left yet. And John Bosang, who became my Paddle Monster partner, he came to the house I was staying at. He goes, come on, man, we're going surfing. And I was like, no. I'm done, man. I just got battered from the ocean yesterday. I'm done. He goes, no, come on, you're coming with me. So we put my board on his car and went down to the ocean, just north of the Blockade Runner, kind of just south of that inlet where you go in. Yeah. And we get out of the car and it's like chest high glass, like glass. And so I was like, oh, this looks better. Like, maybe I can do this. And I could get out, no problem. Like, I could surf, straight in, wasn't shredding or anything, but it was really fun. So that kind of rejuvenated me. Yeah. So I went home and I realized that my weakness was like any kind of rough water. So I spent the whole summer just chasing any waves I could. Yeah. And I got a little better. And I got a 14-foot board, and I went back to the Carolina in the fall for this race they called the, what was it called? The Surf to Sound. Yep. And we took off the beach, and I was behind, and we went around the buoy and we went down towards the jetty. And it's like half of Graveyard, this race. And Chris was ahead of me by quite a bit. And I started catching waves, and I passed him. And as I passed him, he's like, just like shocked, like, where did you learn to do this? And I was like, I put my time in, man. I put my time in. And so I turned into jetty first, and once we got in the flat water, just paddled away. And it felt really good, you know, to have put the time in and gotten, you know, somewhat competent in the ocean. And so I was kind of hooked after that, and I just kept, you know, doing it and kept trying to get better. And I don't have the background that in ocean paddling that like most of the guys do, or I don't have, you know, an ocean to paddle in a lot like you do. And the lake sometimes is like an ocean, and other times it's like the river. It's just like glass.
Yeah.
So we just have to make do with what we have, and when the conditions are good, try to make the most of them. But, you know, I've become a decent downwinder for a guy that, you know, didn't grow up in the ocean or doesn't have an ocean. And, you know, like a good flat water racer. And when you factor age into it, you know, really good. And it's been just a ton of fun. And so I would say that stand-up paddling has been the best thing really that happened to me. And I say it like this, like, you know, one of the things I liked about sprint canoe was that when I finished my Olympic career, I was still able to go and enjoy it. It would be like being a cyclist and still being able to go for a ride.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like if I'd been a wrestler or a diver or a gymnast, like how could you continue to do your sport and still enjoy it? Right? Because it doesn't lend itself well to going out and, you know, doing it on a Saturday morning with your friends. But canoeing, I could do that. And then along came Dragon Boat, and I got like, you know, 6 great years traveling around with all my buddies, racing against guys that I used to race against in canoe on all the courses that we used to race on. So that was super fun. And then I got into outrigger and, you know, discovered what the ocean is like to paddle and catch a wave. And it was still paddling, it's still a paddle in my hand.
Yeah.
And being able to apply what I knew about working a paddle to these new disciplines was really fun. And then stand-up paddling, which is so much like C1, but standing up. Like it's silly how similar it is. But, you know, with the complexity of having to do it on both sides and having to, you know, do it in all conditions. But, you know, here I am now. I'm like, I just turned 59 and I'm doing what I found I loved doing when I was 11 years old, really, right? And how fortunate can you be to be able to go and do every day what you love doing? And I've never not had a day since I first went down to the canoe club where I don't look forward to having a paddle in my hand.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that's where stand-up paddling has been just amazing. And then when I got I mentioned I was a teacher for nearly 20 years. I taught at an all-girls private school, which I never would have imagined I would have ended up there, but it was a really good job. And but in 2014, Adam and Mark Oldershaw, who was the top canoe paddler, you know, they asked if I would come onto the team and work with them through till 2016. So I took that job and ended up working with a lot of other athletes as well. But I asked for leave of absence for my teaching job because it's only a 2-year gig, and they didn't grant it to me. So I quit my teaching job. So I didn't have, when the contract ran out for coaching, I didn't have a job in teaching to go back to, and I had to do something else. And that's when we started Paddle Monster, and you know, it's been really good because I've been able to coach and you know, actually share, you know, things that, you know, really mean something to me rather than what I was teaching when I was a teacher. And it's been great. You know, like it pays the bills. Met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of great people. It's been really cool that I've got to work with some really top athletes as well, not just the, you know, like the sort of the masters recreational athletes. So I kind of got some skin in the game when, you know, when you're racing, because some of the guys that I'm coaching are racing too.
Yeah.
And then, you know, my lifestyle is like I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is go paddling.
Yeah.
You know, and then I get down to work. And so like it's really perfect, you know, like it really is. I'm really lucky that a whole lot of things, you know, from our mothers deciding to send us to the canoe club to, you know, being the worst initially in C1 and having the example of John Wood, to having good role models and coaches, to and then having all these opportunities in other paddle disciplines come along at the exact right time. Because if I'd, you know, like if I'd started my canoeing career 10 years earlier and had retired, you know, 10 years earlier, there would be no other paddling discipline for me to go to. Because outrigger wasn't in Canada then, dragon boat hadn't started, stand-up paddling wasn't going to be around for another 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. So everything just kind of came along at the right time, and it's been amazing. So
Yeah, I'm drawing a lot of similarities between us, obviously at different stages of our lives, but
right.
just doing things that we enjoy doing. Like I quit certain things that I thought that didn't allow me to continue my passions and my lifestyle.
Right.
And even seeing you like work hard at like getting better at downwind paddling, like seems similar to what you did when you were starting out canoeing. You had to like, you weren't necessarily like nailing it straight away, but you had to work at it. Like I love hearing that type of thing. And even just like and sharing your knowledge and coaching and giving back. When you're coaching, like what sort of reward do you feel compared to when you were racing? Because I know as a coach, and I had like a couple of the top guys like I coached as well, and they come to me and they're like, oh, I don't know if I can like train under you because like I'm racing you, and I'm like, well, I'm going to train you to the best of my ability because if you win, I win. And I kind of and I like that. I like that
Right.
part of it. Sorry, we just lost the connection because I ran out of storage on my laptop, but these are the things that happen when you're just running a basic operation on Zoom. So I was just talking about coaching and racing, and obviously racing against the athlete I coach against. And I find for me, it's great to have those people racing as well. And I think you draw motivation as well from the people that you're racing against, and you're seeing them do well. And I think having all the other athletes on my training program, which is booth training, seeing them do well and seeing them get out of bed and like some of my athletes, like especially the mature age athletes who are just banging out sessions like they're like 20 years old, and you just
Right.
it's really incredible to watch. I think a key thing as well, like as a coach, you're learning different ways to coach people because not everyone like if you have a program like say like we were talking about with kayaking before, you have this like set thing that everybody does, but as you get older and you learn, you're like, well, there's so many other factors that these people need to learn or need to do, and it's just there's so much into coaching that I really enjoy. And I don't think I necessarily ever thought I was gonna be a coach. I knew I enjoyed giving people tips. Like I used to hold myself back sometimes when I was like training because I'm like, I can just see that you're doing this wrong, but I don't want to tell you because I'm like racing you, and it would feel weird coming from a peer. But now that you sort of have the confidence and the ability to be able to tell people what to do or what you think they should do, and then you see success from that, I think it's a really rewarding experience.
I find the exact same. I mean, it's you know, like even like it doesn't matter the level that you're coaching at. Like one of the things that I find really rewarding is like there's a number of athletes that I coach that either have never really been athletes before or they haven't been athletes in a long time. And they found paddling and they've really gotten excited about it. And so helping them, teaching them how to train, how to race, and helping them through, you know, everything that we learned when we were beginning to train. And as you say, getting to the point where they're banging out workouts like machines, and then racing well, is really really satisfying, and it's been a lot of fun. And to go, one of the big events for me and the people that I end up coaching is Chattajack, and so there'll be like 2/3 of the people I coach end up racing that race, and last year a lot of them are nervous about the distance because it's a 31-mile 50K race, right? But last year every single person finished under the cutoff. Every single person beat their target time, and they all, the ones who were nervous about finishing or about the distance, I kept telling them that if you do the work and you keep hitting, you keep doing the day-to-day, you'll be able to it's not going to be a problem. You'll be able to do it. And they were all managed to do it. That's really satisfying when that happens. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got guys like, I've had the privilege in stand-up paddling now to work with great athletes, and when they do well, against, the very best, basically when they're achieving their goals, or when they're, even if they're falling short, but they're coming away saying, man, I had a great race. Boothie was too good that day. I'm pleased with what I got. It makes me feel really good to know that I've had a part in that, just, I think too, I think you said that, when they win, you win, or when they do well, it's like you did well. I think, for most of my life, paddling was about my own goals, and now it's about the goals of other people. And it's not so much using my physical ability as much as using my brains and my experience and my ability to communicate to help these people achieve their goals. And being able to take things that I've learned and pass them along and have it make a difference to people is like it's, in many ways, I think it's more satisfying than just what I do for myself, because it's impacting other people. And when you see how much it means to them, and when and when they tell you that they wouldn't have been able to do it without what they learned from you or what you helped them with, that is really really impactful. It's really it's really like a special thing. And I do like it too, because it's like I am analytical. I was analytical about my own training, but like I can try all kinds of stuff that like I never tried on myself because I wasn't my own coach. And I think that experimenting is really fun. I don't want it to sound like I'm experimenting randomly with people that I'm coaching when they're putting their heart and soul into what they're doing. The experiments are the experimentation is like, I mean, it's what I mean. It's not random, crazy stuff, but it's like trying things that make a lot of sense, but you never tried for yourself, but you have a high level of confidence that they're going to be effective. And then to find out that they are in fact effective makes you feel really good, and in that case, not just for what it did for them, but I always enjoy whether it's solving like a crossword puzzle, or whether it's solving like a puzzle on how to help somebody, go to a new plateau. It's a challenge. It's a puzzle. It's a problem I have to solve or figure out a solution to. And so finding the answer is a satisfying thing.
That's so key with coaching, and I find that myself as well. Like the best way to learn yourself is to actually to communicate that with others and actually learn
Mhm.
from what they're doing and see what they're doing to get better.
Yeah.
And then like obviously you're teaching yourself by telling people stuff. Like I remember when I first started coaching, like I had to re-engineer what I was doing because I was like, well,
Mhm.
I'd do this, and then like I was speaking to people about what I did, and they were like, I don't understand. And you're like, how do you not understand? Like it's obvious. And then you'd have
Yeah.
to like go from here, and then you go back, and then you're breaking down the steps and
Yeah.
working out, okay, so how do I tell this person what I do? And then what I tell them isn't exactly what I want them to do, but it's the perception of what I say that will help them get to what they're
Right.
doing. And I think
Yeah.
that's really great about coaching because you can actually you learn more, but then as you spoke about experimentation, it's not necessarily experimentation, it's kind of a culmination of your knowledge from the different coaches you've had, from the
Right.
experiences that you've done, from the different sports that you've done as well,
Right.
to give person like this example of what you think they should do, especially if you've competed against competitors and you're like, well, I know that they did this and I was doing this and they got this, but I didn't get that. So then maybe I can add that into your program and see if that works for you.
Right.
Like, and that's the same thing that I do as a coach for myself
Mhm.
when I talk about breaking down those events that I compete in still. And I'm like, okay, well, I did this wrong, I did this wrong. Okay, maybe I need to add this in, and it'll just be a new session. I'm like, okay, I got to write this session now, and that's something that's really key. And I think as all coaches, we can kind of I can relate to what you're saying, but you can also see like there's also that likeness of mind between the different coaches that all these athletes have, because in any industry there's going to be a lot of different coaches who have a lot of different ideas, but
Right.
they're not necessarily right or wrong, or especially for the individual has to take that knowledge on board
Right.
and use it in a way that works for them. And I know when I talk about for technique, for example, I say first thing I always say when I do a clinic or anything like that, I always say, I don't know everything. This
Right.
is the idea of what I think you should do based on the experiences that I've had. And
Right.
if you come away from this session or this talk and you like you learn one thing, that's great for me. But don't
Yeah.
think because I say it that somebody else is wrong, because that's not the case. It's just whatever works for a different body type or a different mentality or how
Right.
much time you have to train and all these different factors that eventually lead to what you're talking about, that experimentation.
Yeah. And I think another thing that I've really enjoyed with coaching is that it's made me look at paddling, um, like canoe paddling as well as stand-up paddling, um, a bit differently. Like I don't really look initially at what um, the paddler looks like when they're paddling. Like I'm looking at the paddle and I'm looking at the board, and I've actually just broken stuff down into what does the paddle do.
Mm.
And so I'm looking at things like differently than I ever really looked at canoeing or paddling before. And then, like I figure there's 6 basic things that we're all trying to do. And um, anyone I've ever spoken to, like, doesn't disagree with them. It's but how we each do those 6 basic things, like secure water in the face of our blade, hold it there, pull herself to the paddle, push herself past it. Big muscles preferentially over small muscles. Use our body weight. Just those are just examples of 3 of them. And but how we solve these problems, how to do these most effectively for the toolkit that we have, right? Because we're all different. We're of
Mm.
different shapes and sizes. Even if we could find 2 individuals exact same height and weight, the length of their long bones are going to be different. Some people have more height in their upper body, some more of their length is in their lower body. Some people have different, they're even if the long bones are all the same length, the origin and insertion of muscles across joints are going to be in different places. People have different percentages of fast twitch or slow twitch muscle fiber. Some people are more aerobically developed, some people are stronger, but we've all got these toolkits that are different. And so how do we solve the problem of doing those basic things with our paddle, with our body, to make our board go fast efficiently,
Yeah.
right? We're going to look different as we do it. So, there's no one way to do it.
Yeah. And that's something
so,
that I've learned as well.
yeah, and it's really fun trying to share that with people, explain it in a way that they'll understand it and appreciate it, and then start to look at different individuals and see how they paddle. And even though there's no one way to paddle, there are certain things that good paddlers do at certain points in the stroke that help you do the basic things you should be trying to do better, you know. And like I'm really geeked out over getting video of people and good people, and looking at it, and then just like slowing it right down and even frame by framing it. And what I find is that, you know, there are points of the stroke where can take you and me and Connor and you know, Christian Anderson and whoever, and we'll all hit the same point and be in the same body position for one frame, you know, at the front of the stroke, and one frame in the middle of the stroke, and one frame at the exit. But how we connect the dots between those 3 points is totally dependent on our shape, our size, you know what I mean? And so we all look different when we're paddling, but when you start to look at things on that, really, like when you really dissect it, there are certain things like the position that we all get into. If I can teach people that I'm working with, you know, remotely by Zoom, looking at their video every week, and then they keep sending me new video, and we keep going over it every week for 8-10 weeks. If I can keep helping them get into particular positions, you know, and they can do a lot of that just on land, just like I did as a kid in front of the full-length mirror at my parents' house. Then it's easier to find those positions in the water. And if they can just find those positions, our bodies are intelligent enough to connect the dots between them. And you end up paddling really well for your body, you know. And it's so I would have never thought of like, I even wish that, you know, when I was coaching the guys in the national team, I hadn't thought things through like this. This has really only been like in the last, you know, sort of 2015 to present. And I really wish that, you know, I had the opportunity to go back and coach at that level in canoeing again. With the approach that I would take now, because just it's a shame, but so many coaches, like, you go to your clinic and you say, okay, first thing is, you know, I'm not telling you this is how you should paddle. I'm telling you this is something, you know, you should try. It, like, there's many different ways, but this is a way that works for me. This is a way that makes sense to me. You should try it, and you might have some success with it, right? Like, you always qualify things like that. I do the same thing. But there's coaches out there that will tell you this, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it doesn't work that, you know? And there's coaches like in a lot of places who are coaching at a high level and who have that approach. And I just think that they'd be so much better off if they had a little bit more of a open mind and a recognition that every athlete is different. But there are common things that you really do. And you really can't argue with them, you know. It's just but every athlete should be able to kind of solve the problem and how best to do them for them, do those things for them, because, you know, you're going to do it different than I am, and different than Connor does, and different than Tituan does, you know, or different than any of the women do. And it's just, you know, it's just and that fascinates me, to think that there's the paddling can be described in a way that is so basic as, okay, this is what happens with the paddle. This is what makes the board go. This is what you do with your body weight, or with your, you know, this is, you know, these are the kind of muscles you kind of want to engage. But that doesn't tell you how to do those things.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you have to actually then start working with the athlete and start helping them find the way to best do those things for the tools that they have.
It comes back to what I was speaking about, I think, like in summary of what you're saying. It comes back to like when I was training in the institute and I stepped out of it and started coaching myself. I started doing individualized based programming, and I
Yeah.
think that's key. Like with the way that different body shapes are, like talk about long bones, short bones, like more torso. Like I've got more torso, shorter legs, like
Right.
shorter arms. I've got a lot of strength through my torso, so I have to work it that way. But as you're talking about, people move the paddle through the water very similarly, but do it a different way. Like the way that Tituan paddles and the way that I paddle is a completely different way that Bruno paddles is even different as
Right.
well. But we're
Right.
all like kind of that distance type paddle. Even Noik coming across now in that distance realm as well. He
Yeah.
doesn't paddle a similar way, but we're all kind of trying to move the paddle through the water the same way. And when you're teaching people about video analysis, they're like, oh, but like you do this and I think you do this. And it's like, well, no, that's what I do, and that's what it looks like I'm doing. And I'll describe to people when I'm doing video analysis, like I had to get a young fella up on Tuesday night, and I was doing his video analysis, and I was like, stand up, just do this, turn this, like do this, like similar to what you do as a coach in person. And you're trying to just go, this is how your body should feel when you're hitting the catch. Because you
Right.
can, at a point, like you're sort of doing the video analysis, you're talking back, you're drawing lines, you're doing all these different things. This is where the stroke should be, this is where the power phase should be. You're trying to describe it. As you coach more people, you probably get more clear and concise of doing it.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think you get more comfortable coaching an individual. Like you'd learn that here's like, if this is the center circle of the foundations of technique, outside of that circle are all the ways that you can do it. And then there's the
Right.
people right on the exterior who do it like in a way that you just think that could not be possibly a way that you can paddle fast,
Right.
and they paddle fast. And you're just like, they're the anomaly. But you've got the core foundations at the basis of all these types of strokes and all
Right.
these types of programs.
Right. But even the people that are way outside there and that like they look like, you know, completely different. If you like, a lot of it is just like noise. If you just like sort of stop
Yeah,
looking at what the body does for a second and start looking at what the paddle does, and
yeah,
then start bringing in the body again, but looking at it. Don't get confused about how they move their arms, or you know, start to look at at how they apply their body weight, or start to look at what, you know, where is the power coming from. And almost everybody, it's going to come from the center of their body, you know. And you start, even there you start to see, oh, they're not that different. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah,
it's like a lot of it is people look at stuff and quite frankly, I think a lot of people see the wrong stuff, like or it's like not being able to see the forest because of the trees,
yeah,
you know. And but then it's how do you then the art is being able to explain to somebody, like you're doing with that guy, getting him up and moving around, telling him kind of the things that he should be feeling, so that he can start to find his own way to do it right, you know. And I love it. Like I can't get enough of doing that. It's just it's really, that's really satisfying when you can take somebody who, you know, they send you their first video and it looks, you know, it looks like, I don't want to like make anyone feel bad, but it looks awful, you know. And but you can explain some fundamental things about what they should be trying to do, and you can start giving them some drills that they can do on land to put themselves in good positions, and would that allow them to do those things maybe more easily. And then you can give them some work to do that isn't work, you know,
yeah,
because the big mistake that people make is they try to refine or adjust or modify their technique while they're grinding out hard workouts. And you
totally.
can't do that, right? You got to take a step backward to end up going 2 steps forward. So I always say, you want to improve your technique, let's take a step back. Let's really be deliberate, methodical about how we're approaching technique.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about your aerobic fitness, you're going to do some land-based training for that. And
Yeah.
because, you know, you don't want to confuse it too. And then in a short period of time, you know, watching these people go from, you know, not doing a lot of things well to doing a lot of those fundamental things that you're supposed to do really well.
Yeah.
And you know, and even on them, I can pause their video in maybe 3 different places, and I could mirror it over top of a still photo I have of you or me or somebody else at, you know, for one frame. But then everything else is going to look different because how they move, you know, can they hit those positions? Great, but everything else is going to look different in between just because their bodies are different and they're, you know, and some people explaining the concept of gears in paddling, you know, like what a great thing. Like it seems really obvious if you're a cyclist that you want to have gears.
Yeah.
But you know, most people who come to me for technique help have never really thought gears through. And yet you explain it and it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, I use my paddle, but I can be in a different gear by how heavy I load up the blade.
Yeah.
And wow, does that ever change what they can do when they're racing? And
I
so
think, and I think it's so key, like everything you're speaking about there, like coming down to like the foundations of technique and foundations of how the paddle moves through the water and seeing
yeah,
how different people do it. I think, and sometimes it's quite difficult for people to understand. They go, well, they send you a video and it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with my technique? And you're like, well, there is 50 things that I can break down, but I can only give you right now, I can give you 3 or 4 because
exactly.
if I
Yeah,
tell you too much, you just completely change your
right,
technique into a worse way. So then
right.
it's like, and then even when you're talking about breaking it down into stages, when you're like interval training, like if I have a level 2 session, I didn't touch on it before, but sometimes people really struggle to do like a level 2, like easy workout where you're
Yeah,
just focusing your technique, you're focusing your rhythm. People can't fathom that that session is actually as critical as that level 4 or level 5 session, you know,
yeah,
like you can only do 1 or 2 level 4, level 5 sessions a week. But then the rest is just like is getting your technique right, is getting your efficiency right, is understanding your feel, understanding the conditions, all those type of things. And when you're doing those level 2 workouts, it's about breaking down a single thing each interval, working on like whether you write it down on your board, whether you understand it mentally, but go, okay, this one I'm going to shorten my stroke to come out of a
yeah,
certain area, or I'm going to reach out a certain way, or I'm going to keep my hand a certain distance from my head.
right.
But it's hard to do all of it at once. So it's down to, I think, a good coach that's able to help you recognize those things. And I know even Vincent Guillermin from Training Week actually messaged me last year, and he wanted to use my stroke as an example for a magazine that he was writing about. And I was like, well, absolutely, like you can for sure do that. But there's like that general respect, I think, between all the coaches where you're all trying to get the best out of individuals and you're all trying to see the sport succeed and move forward. And
Mhm.
I think that's inevitable. You're going to have lots of different opinions, but essentially it's all coming from the same place, which I
Yeah,
think is really cool.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And it's just it really is, you know, fun for me to um just to talk to share with people, you know, kind of things that they can do to work the water, their paddle against the water more effectively. You know, it's just it's because when you do it well, right, it's a great feeling.
It's incredible.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so many people, you know, like for one reason or another, and there's just like countless reasons why people just can't feel the water like you can. But they can start, you know, you can help them address a bunch of the things that are preventing them from doing that,
Yeah.
and they can improve tremendously. And that I find really satisfying. You know, even if they never race, even if they're just going to be able to you know, to use paddling as a you know, better as a fitness vehicle. It's great that you know, that you're able to help people like that. It really is it really is fun. And I think it's been a fun challenge because we're both doing the same thing where we're coaching people all around the world. And so, the coaching model I grew up with when I was an athlete was that the coach is in a motorboat beside you, or maybe in a canoe or a kayak beside you, but like they're with you. And then all of a sudden now, with the world that we live in and the ability to communicate, you're coaching people who are, time zones away from you.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that's great because you can give them training programs and workouts to do, and you can talk to them about race preparation and the mental side of it and everything else. But that being beside somebody and watching them take every stroke and telling them to do something, and then seeing how the boat or the board responds to them doing something a little bit differently, that part is removed. That that's taken away from you. You can't do that. And yet, just in the last year and a half, just doing what we're doing now, Zooming with somebody and sharing video and looking at the video and going over it and then getting up and demonstrating something on land and having them do it, and geez, you can actually you can actually coach technique by distance.
Absolutely.
And it's super cool. Like, it really is.
It is cool.
Yeah, who would have thought that, even a couple of years ago, that we could have done this.
And I think
really,
people are and when people are talking to you about signing up or like to Paddle Monster or to Booth Training or whatever training thing it is, people are a bit hesitant because people are so used to, especially like maybe a few of the older generation, or maybe like not older, but like 50 plus or 45 plus, who are so used to having that coach in a boat or having someone hands on there all the time. I think that they really need that. And some people really do. But they're a bit hesitant to be able to jump on to an online programming, an online personal coaching plan, or one that's got like Zoom calls and video analysis and plans and all that type of stuff. They're a bit hesitant, but I think you learn over time how effective this type of training is because you see the results. Like, you see your athletes getting results and they're getting better and they're beating the people they want to beat and they're beating their times and they're doing all these things. And it's such a cool world to live in, that we're so connected in that way. Like 20 years ago, it was impossible to do something like this, but now it's so easy to be connected. Like, we're talking and you're in Canada and I'm in Australia. It's just crazy.
No, it really is amazing. And then just the tools that we have. Like, I can remember the first time I was ever videoed in canoe. It was on a video that was like on two little reels, And so and you watch the video, and then the coach talked to you about it, and then you left the video room, and within 5 minutes, everything that you saw and everything the coach told you is starting to get a little bit blurry, right? And by the time you go to your next workout, you've forgotten half the stuff, or you can no longer have a good image of what you saw in the video. And now, when I coach kids at the canoe club, like, I video them, and then we go over it, on an iPad or something while they're on the water. They can go, and then you can go and, actually try to, make the change right away. But I get off the water, and the first thing I do is I email it to them.
Yeah.
They have their own video library of their progress.
Yeah.
And it's crazy what can the tools that are at coaches and athletes' disposal now. And we're not even talking about like Olympic level athletes where they've got people in lab coats following them around doing physiological testing. We're just talking about video. It's just it is amazing, and it makes a big difference. And if an athlete has a coach like you or I that's interested in this and has a passion for it and enjoys sharing it with somebody else and problem solving, being analytical, then they're really going to get something out of their experience.
And there's like such a true connection now as well that you can have with your athletes. Like, you're constantly messaging them, you're constantly chatting to them on video calls. Like, it's not like before where you might just get sent a program by email and you might get a text message. Like, it's such a connected experience now. And even though you're not in the boat, I'm sure people can feel that I'm there or you're there or any other coaches there, because when they finish the workout and you can see it come up, you're like, okay, you did this. Like
Yeah,
it's just such an interconnected experience where
yeah,
even though you're not there in person, like you're there in spirit, I guess, like, but you're
right,
constantly there. Like you're never disconnected from your athletes. And I
right.
got a couple of questions from like I guess the audience, and I wanted to shoot them now. So Hendrik Carstens, he's a guy up there in Denmark. He said it's a food question, and we're going to pump through these a little bit, but we'll
Yeah.
try and get through them. But do you prioritize certain foods over others, and which ones and why?
I am an omnivore. I eat everything, and
Yep.
I try to eat clean, obviously. But no, I try to do like the balance of carbs, fats, and proteins. But I try to make sure that I get enough protein, because I think that's one thing that is hard to get enough protein when you're really training hard. I think people end up getting shortchanging on that a little bit, because there's a lot of tissue breakdown when we're hammering away, and I do think that's important to really replace the proteins. But I don't eat a high protein diet. Like carbs are fuel, right? And so
Yep.
I eat a lot of carbs, and it's like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and good lean meats and that type of thing. I'm not a picky eater, and I've always been that way. Like I ate well at home when I was a kid growing up. My mom fed me well,
Yep.
and she still does when I go visit her, and then I try to eat well, at home too. So um,
I think that's key. I don't really follow a certain diet or a certain diet plan, but try and eat clean, try and eat well, make sure you're getting a lot of the different food groups and just keeping, I don't know, you kind of know what you need. Like sometimes like I know I need a steak. Like I might
yeah,
travel and like
yeah,
not eat meat for 3 days by accident. Like I didn't realize. And then I'm like, why do I feel
right,
so shit? I'm like, I haven't had enough protein.
yeah, yeah,
So I'll go and have a lot of protein, and that's something that I've learned over time. And you gradually learn what your body needs, but there are all these different diets and things that you can do and that. But I've always done exactly what you've done: just eat
yeah,
clean,
yeah.
eat like a balance of everything, never too much of anything, and you're seeing your body operates better doing that.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting. We've had like even back when I was on the team, but more so nowadays when there's bigger budgets for sports science. Our canoe kayak team has had nutritionists work with them,
Mm,
and they all say the same thing. Like there hasn't been one that advocates some kind of you know uh, fad diet or bizarre diet. Like there's no Atkins diet or paleo diet or whatever. I don't even know the names of all of them. It's
yeah,
like eat clean, eat like if is provided you're not like a vegetarian, eat like everything, be an omnivore. Um, but make sure you get your protein if you're a high level athlete. But
yeah,
carbs are fuel, and good quality carbs like low glycemic carbs, and you need fats. So like like it's really nice actually
yeah.
being able to that way, because you can enjoy everything.
Yeah, and I think, do you think there's a bit of a mindset thing as well there? Like I find if I'm giving up too much, like especially when I was like probably like around my 20, like mid 20s, I was giving up too much of certain things, and this is like balance of life balance, that type of thing. But giving up too much things like with food or with like I don't know, seeing my friends or like working too much, or like if I was doing too much of any of those things, that was when my life balance went out. And I think that's even with food. I think you can try too hard on one of these certain diets and you end up, well, I haven't personally tried them, but from my experience and from my understanding of other people doing them, you end up getting to a point where you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to cut back. I had a mate who went like vegan for like 2 years, and then like
Mhm.
all of a sudden he started eating meat like continuously. Like, like it was just a,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. One thing I am certain of is that if you really have a rigid diet and you're an athlete that travels, you're setting yourself up for challenges. And I
oh,
had this conversation with Seychelles a couple of years ago, because she has a unique diet, and I try to explain, like, when I was paddling and the world was different, there was all these communist countries like the East Bloc, the East Germans, the Hungarians, the Soviets, the Romania, Bulgaria were traveling behind the East Bloc a lot. And you would go and race in these locations, and you were victims of the organizing committee of the competition. So you'd stay in the hotel they'd put you in, and the hotel would serve you 3 meals a day. And they drop some fatty piece of meat on your plate, some kind of bizarre looking salad, and some potatoes. And like, if you were particular or rigid about your diet, how were you going to cope with that?
Yeah.
Like, you just set yourself up for challenges that you could easily avoid. And I just think that if you're pretty comfortable with, as long as you're getting your food groups.
Yeah.
If you're pretty comfortable with what you eat, like, oh, they're serving us pork today, great. Oh, they're serving us steak today, great. Oh, we got fish. Oh, cool. Like, whatever the vegetable is, it's vegetables. Like, and you don't really care, and you eat it, you're getting fueled. And it made my life so easy traveling to some of these places where the food was sometimes questionable, that I ate, and I didn't worry about what I was eating. I ate it, and I was always well fueled. And
that
I just think
everything that I do as well. I think that's the super key. I know I learned, because I was traveling so much. I was like, there's just no way that I can have a specific diet. There's no way that I can have a specific meal. Like, because I'm not going to be searching around Paris or in Portugal or in Spain. Like, I can't find my food.
You put yourself under
and
right? Like, you go to some place and suppose you can't find what you're supposed to eat, and you're there for a big competition. Like, what do you what are you supposed to do? I'm just gonna have to walk to the other room here because I'm running low on batteries. So so yeah, but like, what are you supposed to do? Like, you've gotta just kind of go with the flow, and just, as long as you're eating and fueling, and that's what matters.
And then I've got a question from Lukovac on Instagram. He's asked, what has kept Larry Cain going all these years? I'm not sure where we direct that question, but what has kept you going? I'm assuming in sport, in life, and what you've done. We have touched on it, but maybe you can give us a little bit of a insight.
Well, yeah, I just love what I'm doing. Like paddling captured my imagination a long time ago when I was a little kid, and I'm thankful that I had a good environment to learn canoeing in, and good coaching early on. And so the sport captured my imagination. I had guys that used to be, like, my first coach was an Olympian in 1956 in Australia, in Melbourne, and he told me all kinds of stories about going to the Olympics. And so even before I saw John Wood win his medal, I knew of the Olympics, and I had great storytellers as my first coaches. They've made fun. And so it became something that I was really captivated by it. And then over the years, it's obviously my preferred form of exercise, and I value being healthy and fit. But I've had so many good experiences, so many fun times, whether it's traveling and racing, or whether it's just going down to the canoe club or going down to the lake and paddling with my buddies. And the friendships I've made have been amazing. There is a community that we're both part of, and I can count on one hand the number of people that I've met in all of my years paddling, all different paddling disciplines, that I don't really like, and I've met literally like thousands and thousands of people. So it's kind of what I do at this point in my life. And I get up in the morning, and I have some breakfast, and I put my dogs in the car, and I drop them off at my mom's while I go, because she's got a big yard, and I go paddle. And then I pick them up again, and I go back to work. And but it's it's just what I do. Some people, everyone's got a thing that they do, and that's what I do.
Isn't
And
it great in just paddle sports in general? Like you have such a great community of
yeah,
athletes you race against, like competitors, different like I don't know business interests that you like.
mhm,
You're working all to like against each other, but towards like the same common
right,
goals, and you've got all this mutual respect for a lot of these people. But I think once you work out that all these people are the same as you and they enjoy the same things as you become really close and tight with so many people. Like I
right,
just like, and then you find like when you travel, especially like the paddling community, whatever paddling community sport you're in, it's so open. Everyone wants to like paddle
right,
with you and like enjoy, and you can talk about paddling, and it's
right.
great, and it's something that I want to do forever. Like I
Yeah,
really enjoy it, and I think
yeah.
that's something that you're sort of saying as well.
Well, 100%. I mean, like you sound like, like I'm just an older version of you, or you're a younger version of me in terms of how we feel about what we're doing about paddling.
Yeah.
It's I was influenced by people that were, well, my age now, and who were still, deeply involved in paddling when I was a
Mm,
kid. And I looked at it and I realized that it was, it wasn't something that you necessarily only did, while you're in high school or while you're a student at university or whatever. It was for a lot of people, but it didn't have to be. It could be something that you could do for your entire life. And
yeah.
and yeah, I said earlier, I'm just lucky that I stumbled across it, and I'm lucky I stumbled across it when I did,
Yeah.
because I've seen a lot of cool things in my travels, and um, and every time I've needed just a little bit of a change, there's been another discipline of paddle sport come around that I've been able to embrace, and but I have to tell you, I think stand-up paddling is the ultimate.
Oh, that's good to hear. Peter Muehlhauser from Switzerland. How important in percentage is the mind to win a race, and during training preparation, especially at the Olympics? I know we've touched on it, but what percentage would you give it?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, um, there's when you consider the fact that if you watch the Olympics, and we just had Olympics on last week, virtually every athlete there is, the ultimate physical specimen for their event, and only one's going to win, or only three are going to get in the podium. Um,
Mm,
I think um, technique is important in our sport. Obviously, it's not just a physical thing, but um, if you think of all the times you've seen um, people who are very fit with poor technique, they don't they don't use their fitness because their technique's poor. Think of all the times you've seen people with great technique and great fitness, but who aren't able to put it together mentally. They don't
mm.
perform well. Like ultimately it's I think it's the decider. It's the deciding factor on whether you're going to be successful or not.
Would you
I
say
don't
it's
know whether
60-40,
I don't know whether it's the
50-50?
most important, because you could have somebody who's, you know, like the strongest person ever mentally, but if they're out of shape or they don't paddle
Yeah.
well, you're not going to do it. They can't overcome those things. But when you consider that most people are quite fit, and most people are, at a high level, paddle really well, and not everybody wins. I think you really need to look at the people um, that are winning and ask yourself, what is it about them up here that's allowing them to, achieve their full potential?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly how you got to approach it. There's just so many factors, and some things will matter more than others depending on what physical state you're in or mental state you're in. We'll go
Right.
to a question from Kane DeGraw. He is a guy from Australia, actually. He said, "What? So you've got the offset stance," and he said,
Mhm.
"Why do you believe that the offset feet stance that you use is the most powerful and efficient position?"
Well, you know what? I don't believe that it's necessarily the most powerful or efficient. Um, I think your stance in a board is one of these things that's a personal preference thing. I come by it honestly because I paddled in a sprint canoe where I have my right knee down and my left foot in front of me. So if you get in that position and then you stand up, you're in a surf stance basically.
Mm.
And so, when I told you the story of being that the guy made me go out on a stand-up board for the first time, and I didn't want to, but I went anyway. I had I stood like I had just stood up out of a C1 stance. And over the years, my stance has become more and more parallel. I probably stand like that now when I'm paddling on the right, with my right foot toed out a little bit to the side and my left foot like that. So, and on the left side, I'm like that or slightly staggered.
Yeah.
I do think that it makes it easier to kind of rotate and drop your paddling side to the water to get your paddling side engaged. If you are standing with a parallel stance or a slight stagger where you're open, your hips are, turned open to the paddling side. I think if you have the opposite stagger, I think that's where I think that there's, I would say that I would make a comment about somebody's stance. I think it's personal preference if you have a slight stagger to the paddling side or your level. But if you're paddling on the right and you're staggered with your right foot forward, I think you'll find as you try to go down to the water, you get jammed up. It's like your hip and your ribs kind of get in the way of each other, and it prevents you from sort of getting down on the water. But as long as you're able to use your hips and your core and your legs when you're pulling your stroke, which are the big muscles, I think that it's a comfort thing. What do you feel most comfortable in? And having watched, I know what I've always done, but having watched a lot of other racers, I see a lot of racers change their stance depending on the circumstance in the race, depending on the gear they're in, or whether they're on a wave or not in a wave, or whether they're sprinting, doing, so I think just like it's important to be functional in a few different gears when you're paddling, I think it's probably good to be comfortable with various stances too when you're paddling.
I find that as well now. I know for me, generally when I'm paddling on the flat and like in a longer race, I'll keep parallel, but then I'll shift my feet depending if I'm sitting on wash or something like that, or I like have to bury a whale, I might put more weight on a certain foot. When I'm sprinting, I tend to have a slight stagger to the open side, like you're talking about. That's just from watching other people do it. I'm like, I got to try and compete. So how do I get faster? I try different things. And yeah, obviously if you have the right foot forward, you're on the right side, you're definitely not going to be able to paddle properly. So that's pretty key. But yeah, it's like circumstantial, because when you're surfing downwind, you might actually be in a surfing stance for a lot of the run. Like you don't want to be parallel, or you might be slightly back, or you're stepping. It's just this, as we've spoken about, there's just so much that goes into it. Couple more questions, but I think we've already touched on them. Pete Jackson asked, how do you change the way you paddle when you get older? But we have spoken about that. And one of my mates wrote, "Will Booth look like that when he's 60?" And I was like, probably, because I do like paddling. But mate, I've really enjoyed the chat. It's been awesome to catch up with you and obviously get to know you a lot more through this conversation. If there's anywhere for people to find out more about paddlemonster.com or Larry Cain, just probably shout out now.
Yeah, well, look, I've really enjoyed this as well. I mean, like I said, I've been, I know I've met you a few times at races or at starboard functions, but I've been a big fan of both what you've done as an athlete and as a coach. And so this has been a great conversation, and we should have more of them, whether we're on Zoom or not. Yeah, no, it's just been, I don't really have anything to promote other than, I'm sure people know that my business is Paddle Monster, and it's coaching, yeah, nothing to promote other than just the beautiful sport of paddling.
Yeah. Oh, mate, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure as well. And I've obviously been inspired by a lot of the things that you've done. And I've learned a lot from this conversation as well. So we'll definitely have to do it again. But just out there to everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you want to listen to this and you're watching it on YouTube, check it out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Like and subscribe. If there's anyone you'd like me to interview going forward, please add it into the questions. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. Thanks so much, though, for coming on.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cheers, man. See you later.
So this is on YouTube?